Hello and welcome back to my channel. Make sure you like and subscribe to my channel. Let's begin. Pokémon Master, Champion, has completed his review of the gym leaders in each region. 11 gym leaders have been replaced, along with one regional professor. Below is a list of the replaced leaders. Erica, Celadon City. Blaine, Cinnabar Island. Whitney, Goldenrod City. Price, Mahogany Town. Brawley, Dewford Town. Norman, Petalburg City. Flannery, Lavaridge Town. Roxanne, Rustboro City. Maylene, Veilstone City. Byron, Canalave City. Rourke, Orberg City. The replaced professor was Professor Elm of the Johto region. Whilst the Pokémon Master has not commented on a single of the replaced gym leaders, some of the ex-leaders have stated the reason that they were replaced. Norman and Blaine both said that they were removed after failing to fulfill the requirement of teaching other trainers. Rourke admitted that he was replaced after failing to win enough battles, whilst Brawley, Maylene, Flannery and Whitney all claimed that there were differences between their chosen style and the type of leader demanded by Champion. Now that the review is complete, it is unclear what Champion will do next. Will he settle back and become a distant figure at the top of the Pokémon League? His remote attitude so far suggests that this is a definite possibility. However, an analyst pointed out that whilst he has maintained a cold attitude, his actions have strengthened the Pokémon League, and so predicts that the next step will be one to further strengthen the league. This view is one that has been reflected by many of the gym leaders who kept their places. The Viridian gym leader, Jonathan, felt that the review and restructuring was hugely beneficial, and that he expects Champion to further his restructuring. Jonathan, who has been gym leader for 4 years after the mysterious disappearance of his predecessor Giovanni, is famous for his training school attached to his gym, and announced that he would be recommending his top students to Champion for training when he felt they were good enough. The Violet City gym leader, Faulkner, also suggested that the next step for Champion would be to further strengthen the Pokémon League, as he feels it is stronger now than ever before. Whilst he couldn't suggest what this particular action might be, he did suggest that it might be more subtle than the review. Whilst the review was effective, it also shook the league. Everything that Champion has done so far suggests that he is not stupid, so more major upheaval is unlikely for the moment. Cynthia put the paper down and shut her eyes to think. She was confused by the enigma that was the Pokémon Master. The man acted emotionless a lot of the time, and yet he seemed to understand others' emotions perfectly. It was hard to understand. And then there were his eyes. She had spent a lot of the last few days trying to research what might have caused it. The only example she had found after a fairly exhaustive search was a case of an ancient aura user whose heart had been broken by his partner. However, in that case both the man's eyes were reported as being as dead as one of Champion's was. And Cynthia knew that there hadn't been a true aura user for a millennium. She knew it was possible that he was an aura user, but that would just throw up more questions than ever. Furthermore, she hadn't found any record of anybody who had an eye like the energetic one Champion had. Lost in thought, she didn't notice the door to her office opening. Cynthia, at the sound of her name, Cynthia's eyes snapped open, focusing on the man in front of her. The man who she was trying to figure out. Champion. What can I do for you? I have tracked down a Team Rocket training base. I will be launching an assault on it soon, most likely in the night. I thought you might be interested in knowing. Team Rocket? You found one? Cynthia struggled to keep the disbelief out of her voice. She had done some quiet searching, but knew that Team Rocket had apparently learned how to stay hidden. The members that they had captured refused to talk, and even then Champion had assured her that they knew nothing. How did you find it? Celadon City. In the rundown districts, I found a recruitment station. I was in the process of joining when I arrested the men around me. I found information on a base, and a Pokémon of mine confirmed it was for training. Who are you taking to attack it? Nobody. It's a relatively minor base, my Pokémon and I can handle it. I won't even need the whole group, but I'll take them regardless. Cynthia was aghast. You can't go against a training base alone. Do you know how many rockets could be in there? My scouts informed me that it was a few hundred. And you're going in alone? You're insane. You'll be ripped to pieces. For the first time since she had met him, Cynthia detected emotion on Champion's face. It was there for a fleeting moment before vanishing once again, making her think she might have imagined it. However, she was not wrong. Champion's face had registered amusement for a moment. However, his mask restored, he started to speak once again. Any Pokémon that they have are no worry to me. They won't have any strength. If they have any other weapons, I can protect myself from them. I will organize some transports near the base, and I'll bring the rockets back here. At least take some backup, if only to help you arrest them all at the end. If there are hundreds, how will you be able to bring them all? The same way that you brought in those rockets from Violet. They'll be weakened. Cynthia, I am going, I don't need backup. I just wanted to inform you of what was going to happen. When I'm gone, perhaps you'll want to start the first of your camps. And with that he left her office. Cynthia let out a deep breath. He had just revealed a great deal to her, unfortunately it asked far more questions than it revealed. Remembering that she did still have a different job that she was meant to be doing, Cynthia sent out a series of invitations for her first training camp at Indigo Plateau. 2 days previously, Ash strode through his house into the garden. His scout team was back, and he wanted answers. Alakazam was waiting for him, exhaustion clear in the psychic type. One long-distance teleport was hard enough, but Alakazam had taken 2 Pokémon with him and done it repeatedly over the course of the last few days. As Ash reached him, the Pokémon simply nodded. Ash smiled, and hugged Alakazam, before kneeling to pet Ninetales and tickle Beautifly as the butterfly fluttered to his shoulder. Turning back to Alakazam, he started to question the psychic type. Beyond Lavender? Yes. Training base? Yes. How many of them? Some hundreds. Many recruits. Easy to take. Defenses? Nothing electronic. It'll be easy. Alright. Rest Alakazam. We'll strike in 2 days. Ash then turned back to the rest of his Pokémon. In 2 days we'll attack that base. For years ago those of you who were with me agreed to hit Team Rocket with all that we had. We nearly finished off that organization for good, but Giovanni escaped us. This time, we are stronger, and more numerous. We will not let him get away twice. Over the years you have stood with me and we reached our goal of being the best. Now we need to do this, complete the task we set ourselves. When we have totally eliminated Team Rocket, we will be able to relax. Until then, no Pokémon anywhere they have influence can be truly safe, simply because Team Rocket abused them. So, my friends, rest up. In 2 days we will be at our strongest, and we will fall on that base like a flood. Ash then toured his Pokémon, giving a word to some, petting others. He made it around his entire group of 14 before he headed back into his house, leaving his Pokémon to their rest. After his meeting with Cynthia, Charizard had flown Ash to the edge of the Kanto region, where he met a group of buses. Ash got in the first one, and they started to move. He had managed to get 12 of them, all following the one that he was in. He was leading them towards where his Pokémon had hidden themselves in preparation for the assault. As the buses reached the last open area before the base, they drove into a canyon and turned off. Ash stepped out, and was instantly met by his Pokémon. Stepping back from them, he looked over the Pokémon he had assembled, inspecting each one individually. Ash started with the 4 of his original Pokémon that had stayed with him on the day of departure. Charizard was looking as ferocious as usual. In fact, Ash had noticed that he had been a little more aggressive ever since he saw Pikachu, something mirrored among the rest of the Pokémon when Charizard had told them. It touched Ash to know that his Pokémon cared that much, even if he did worry what might happen if their anger spilled over. Moving on, he saw Sceptile, the grass type, standing proud, its twig still in its mouth. Over the years Sceptile had become a very powerful Pokémon, but he still couldn't compete with some of the others in terms of raw power. However, his strength was in his speed and agility, something which few of Ash's Pokémon could match. Next up was Meganium. The Pokémon couldn't bear to be separated with him, particularly after Pikachu had gone. Meganium had seen how much his oldest friend leaving had hurt Ash, and this, coupled with her love for her trainer and her desire to keep watching the EV that had evolved into Espeon, had caused her to stay. She still didn't understand how Pikachu could have left, but unlike the others, she didn't blame him. She was just sad. The last of the four that had stayed had shocked all of them. Snorlax had impressed Ash with his desire to get stronger in the first few months training, but even so Ash had expected the sleeping Pokémon to leave with the rest. However, he hadn't. Some years later Ash had questioned his Pokémon about the decision, and was given two reasons. Firstly, the exercise was giving Snorlax a bigger appetite and so let him eat more. Equally, Snorlax had to stay awake for longer hours, which gave him more time to eat, when he wasn't training. The other reason Snorlax stayed with Ash was simple. Ash had food, Snorlax liked food. Therefore, he had no reason to go. Regardless of the self-centered reasons, Ash was grateful for Pokémon staying, and the Pokémon had become a true powerhouse of Ash's, as well as completely loyal. Ash then moved on to the rest of the team that he had registered for the World League. He had taken Charizard, Sceptile and Snorlax, although he had chosen not to use Meganium. Sharpedo had been registered, the brutal Pokémon having joined Ash after he had found it beached in the Orange Islands. Ash had helped it to recover, and eventually Sharpedo had come with Ash. After some months Ash had trained it to be able to run on land, and so never be stranded again. As a result, Sharpedo was now able to fight anywhere, something which gave Ash great satisfaction, overcoming his Pokémon's weakness. Sharpedo's loyalty had been cemented by the effort Ash went to in making sure that he was never stuck on land again. In the aftermath of his rescue the Pokémon had been terrified of land. Next up was Altaria. The humming Pokémon had not been part of the team when Ash first faced Team Rocket, but had become staggeringly powerful since joining a few months after. He had met Altaria near Mount Silver. Ash had been there to train in one of the toughest places in the world, but a few weeks in had found Altaria injured. Ash discovered that his training had caused some Fiero to move, and they had attacked Altaria after they wanted to live in the same area as her. Ash treated Altaria's wounds, and then returned her to the wild, but when he came to leave Mount Silver a couple of weeks later, Altaria had returned to him, and asked to come with him. The final member of Ash's frontline team had been met only a few weeks after the day of departure. Ash had woken one night to find an Aaron trying to steal food. Not angry, he had confronted the Pokémon and offered it as much food as it wanted, as well as to make it stronger. 7 years on, Aaron had evolved twice into Aggron and in terms of raw power could match Charizard. The two of them had frequent battles to test their strength against each other. Next Ash reached the scouts on his team. He had put together the idea of a scout team when he was tracking Team Rocket down the first time. He had met Alakazam 5 years earlier, with the Pokémon intrigued by Espeon's mental strength and wanting to come to learn to focus his mind to the same extent. Despite intense training over the years, the Psy Pokémon had never managed to become as powerful as Espeon, but his teleport ability had become far stronger. As a result, he was the obvious choice to head up the scouts, giving them a mobility that couldn't be matched. Ninetales had been captured when Ash had been training at a volcano near to Cinnabar Island. Her sense of smell was what had attracted her to Ash, recognizing the nutritious value of the food he prepared for his Pokémon. She had spent 2 days hiding near his camp trying to find a way to reach the food when Ash fought and captured her. Beautifly had been captured in the depths of a forest in Hoenn, another place where not many trainers went. The butterfly's value to the scouts was her ability to move unseen. Her size, coupled with her ability to move silently through the air, meant that she was virtually undetectable when infiltrating. She also had the ability to hit large areas with single attacks if the scouts ever got into a fight, and her stun spore had saved the rest of the team more than once when tracking down Team Rocket the first time. None of the next three had been with him the last time he fought Team Rocket, but he had picked them all up through the years. He had found a Onyx deep inside Mount Moon, capturing it after a lengthy battle. Ash had gotten out of the habit of catching wild Pokémon that he found, feeling that he had a large enough team, but Onyx had challenged him to a battle, and its endurance had impressed Ash. Onyx had managed to match Ash's Snorlax for a long time, before the sleeping Pokémon finally got a final ice punch in to end the battle. Given that it had matched one of his Pokémon for almost an hour, Ash decided that Onyx was worth capturing and did so. Rapidash was another Pokémon that he had caught at Mount Silver, with the Fire Horse Pokémon wanting to join the trainer whose Pokémon were so powerful. For Rapidash it had also been a case of pride as she had been beaten in a race by Ninetales and Sceptile, although the two of them had used Quick Attack to increase their speed. After some time sulking she had asked to come with Ash to become stronger and faster. She was now the fastest Pokémon Ash had. Finally, Machamp had joined Ash as a Machop, and then evolved twice. Machop had never given a reason for joining Ash, merely marching into his camp and staying. Whenever Ash asked, he was never given a response. Over some time, Espeon had figured it out for him. Machop had been abandoned, and wanted to become stronger to show his previous trainer that it was a mistake to abandon him. After working this out, Ash managed to track down the trainer and the now Machamp had defeated all of his Pokémon single-handed. The last Pokémon that Ash reached was his Espeon. Since the day of departure, Espeon had become closer and closer to Ash, never imposing but always being there. The psychic type had taught herself to communicate with humans telepathically in order to aid her trainer. She could now tell what Ash was thinking without even reading his mind. She was also his most powerful Pokémon, with her psychic strength enabling her to defeat any of the others. It was an accolade to be the strongest in a team with such power, but Espeon was proud to lead them. Her closeness to Ash coupled with her strength meant that she was undoubtedly the leader of Ash's Pokémon, as close a replacement to Pikachu as anybody could ever get. Without her, Ash doubted that he would have gotten through all the years. And now she was still willing and able to fight for him. As Ash went through all his Pokémon he gave each a thorough inspection to make sure that there were no injuries. Happy with the state of his team, he gestured for them to move forward. Starting with a light jog, his Pokémon easily matching his stride, Ash began to move back out the canyon, before accelerating to a pace that all his Pokémon could sustain for the 3 miles to the Team Rocket base. As he ran he checked the sun. It was early afternoon, Ash trusting that he could break the base in the middle of the day without a message getting out. Sam. The boy turned over in his sleep, ignoring the voice. Sam. Go away, he mumbled, irritated at being woken up. After a few seconds he assumed that the owner of the voice had done as bid, and left. Suddenly he heard the voice once more. Totodile, water gun. Sam instinctively moved, throwing himself away from his bed. He almost made it. A jet of water slammed into him, sending him skidding across the floor, before coming to a stop. Groaning and sitting up, Sam Fernandez saw a small blue Pokémon grinning at him. Looking up he saw Melanie standing behind her starter, also grinning wildly. The two of them had made good progress on their journeys over the last week, taking another 2 gyms and capturing more Pokémon. Both of them now had complete teams of 6 Pokémon and they had more back with Professor Rose in Newbark Town. After their gym battle against Whitney's replacement, Olive, in which Melanie had taken 2 attempts to win, they had decided to train more and travel slower. Well, Melanie had. Sam was more inclined to sleep in, hence his somewhat rude awakening. Did you really have to do that, Mel? The wet boy asked, getting to his feet. I mean, what's the hurry? We have ages to train. I don't want to be beaten by another gym leader, she growled at him, annoyance etched across her face. It was embarrassing. Well, maybe if you were a better trainer like me. Sam started, but didn't get any further. Angry at having to wait for him, and annoyed by Sam insulting his mistress, even in jest, Totodile had decided to take matters into his own hands. A huge torrent of water erupted from the big jaw Pokémon, smashing Sam off his feet once again. Thankfully this time he had the bed behind him, and so the landing wasn't too bad, but it still was painful. Melanie was looking at her Pokémon in shock, and even Totodile looked surprised by what had just happened. "Mel, can't you get him to stop that?" Sam asked, now completely drenched, his clothes in dire need of being wrung out. His friend didn't answer. "Mel? I think Totodile just learned Hydro Pump," the girl replied, still staring at her starter with an expression of awe. "That was certainly bigger than usual, and we have been working on that move." Sam looked down at Totodile, the Pokémon looking pleased with himself, whilst still managing to smirk at Sam. Sam decided to be the bigger man and congratulate the Pokémon. "Well done Totodile," he said. "Really impressive. Keep it up and maybe you'll beat Kalava again soon." This time when the torrent of water came, Sam was already moving, laughing as he dived out of the room past Melanie who got caught by Totodile's attempt to blast water at Sam. After the two young trainers had dried themselves off, with Melanie being far less impressed with Totodile's soaking tactics once she was on the receiving end of them, they headed out to a field on the outskirts of Goldenrod City. Releasing their Pokémon, they gave them instructions about how to train. Sam and Melanie then walked around the two teams together, giving each of the Pokémon advice. They had found that this benefited their Pokémon as what one of them missed, the other usually spotted. They had been going for some time when they heard a voice from across the field calling out a greeting. Gesturing to the Pokémon to carry on, Sam and Melanie turned to see a red-headed woman vaulting over a fence and striding towards them. She had 6 Pokeballs at her waist, and possessed a confidence that could only come from a time spent in authority. As she reached them she stood tall in front of the two trainers. "You two both trainers, or are you coordinators?" "We're trainers," Melanie said. "I'm Melanie and this is Sam." "What about you?" The women grimaced. "Am I that quickly forgotten? I would have thought you would at least know who I am." Sam stepped forward at this point. "Whitney, ex-Goldenrod City Gym leader, removed by Champion. You gave the reason for your dismissal as differences between you and the Pokémon Master." Whitney grinned at him, whilst Melanie turned and stared in shock. "How do you know that?" "I do read Mel." Sam grinned. "And you know it has been all over the news on the last couple of days. He's finished the review and they've listed all the leaders replaced." He turned back to Whitney. "I'm sorry for your replacement, it must be hard to take." "It's not that bad," the ex-leader responded. "I was upset when it happened, but I've been able to take a more active role in the Miltank farming up here, whilst being able to look after my Pokémon better and do some training, though not too much. And at least the gym is in good hands." Olive was a good replacement. "Champion does know what he is doing, I'll give that to him." Sam and Melanie looked at each other in surprise. They hadn't expected to see Whitney, and definitely not expected her to be fine with her getting sacked. Before they could say anything else, Whitney started speaking again. "I'm assuming these Pokémon are yours?" Sam and Melanie nodded. "They look strong. Did you beat Olive?" "Yes," Melanie answered. "Took you 2 attempts though, didn't it?" Sam grinned at her. "Sam, I swear, if you don't stop going on about it." "How about a battle, Melanie?" Whitney asked, cutting her off. Sure," the younger girl replied. "How many?" "I think 3-on-3, that was what my gym battles always were." The Team Rocket gate guard stood lazily watching out across the plain towards the base. They knew that they were secure, the gate was the only way in aside from an aerial assault, and an aerial attack was risky, there were enough Pokémon inside to bring down almost any attack. Therefore, the only realistic way into the training base was through the front door, which had 4 guards on it permanently. In front of the base, there was open plain for half a mile. Nobody could sneak up on them. Ash burst out into the plain, and started sprinting. He waved to Rapidash, who charged forwards at high speed, crossing the half a mile in a mere 9 seconds at a colossal speed of nearly 200 miles per hour. It took the guards 10 seconds to notice. Before any of them could even move, Rapidash was upon them. The Fire Horse Pokémon used Flamethrower to take out the two guards outside the gate before leaping over it and landing directly in front of the guardhouse which overlooked the gate. Hardly stopping, Rapid Ash smashed into the two rockets inside the guardhouse, knocking them both out. Prancing out of the building, the Fire Horse Pokémon looked out across the entrance with some satisfaction. No alarm went off, and the rest of the team crossed the open terrain easily. Alakazam teleported to the guardhouse and opened the gates. The team was in. Stepping into the base, Ash looked around. There were no rockets around, so he walked into the guardhouse to pull up a roster of who should be inside the base. Scanning it, he found that there were no rocket executives currently present, but there were nearly 600 rockets, of which more than 550 were recruits. Ash grinned. Alakazam had not been wrong. The base was easy to take. Ash quickly pulled up a map on a screen before he gestured to Alakazam and they teleported into the command center, along with Espeon and Sceptile. Inside were 6 rockets, none of whom had a chance to move before being taken out. Ash cleared his throat pointedly. Alakazam hadn't even had a chance to strike, Sceptile and Espeon obliterating the rockets before he could. Stepping over to the PA system, Ash set it to broadcast to the entire base. All rockets to report to the main training room. Repeat, all rockets to report to the main training room. There is a compulsory training session to attend. Ash put the microphone down, and then gestured to Alakazam once again. Ash, his 3 Pokémon and the 6 unconscious rockets all teleported back to the guardroom. Looking out across the plain, Ash saw the buses he had brought with him. All 12 of them were driving up to the base, and Ash spent a few minutes taking the rockets he had already captured and tying them securely to seats. He then checked his watch. It had been 4 minutes since the announcement. Ash decided to give the rockets a few more minutes before moving in. After another 11 minutes had elapsed, Ash strode out of the guardhouse at the entrance to the base, and down a corridor, his Pokémon advancing at his back. 6 turns later, Ash was grateful that he had managed to bring up a map of the base, enabling him to surround all 4 entrances to the training room with his Pokémon. Espeon stayed with him, helping to coordinate the teams, but Ash trusted his Pokémon to be fairly autonomous under the circumstances. After they had surrounded the room, Ash stepped through the main door, flanked by Espeon and Sceptile. Across the room Charizard led a group through another door, whilst Aggron and Snorlax led the other 2 groups, all 3 of them having to smash through part of the wall as well. The room itself was huge, easily capable of fitting more than 1,000 men inside, with a raised platform at one end which Ash stepped onto. The rockets were all stood in groups around the room. Once inside the room, Ash projected his voice all around, causing instant silence from the rockets as his voice echoed around as if it was coming from a microphone. Team Rocket. Some of you may recognize me whilst some of you may recognize 1 or 2 of my Pokémon. I am Champion, the Pokémon Master. You are surrounded by my Pokémon, and there is no escape. Fighting is futile, you cannot win. I would rather avoid any deaths here, so I would appreciate it if you would just surrender without fighting. Having to fight off every single of your Pokémon would be tedious. As his words sank in, Ash smiled to himself. He was able to tell the general feeling in the room, and it had gone from shock to alarm, to fear to simple confusion. The rockets had no idea what to do, most of them were new and those who weren't had no idea what response fit this situation. Ash then started to speak once again. Your base commander is currently unconscious and tied up, so I need his second in command to step forwards. Silence reigned across the room, as the rockets waited for something to happen. The men around Eric, the base's second in command, were watching him. None of these men were recruits, but none of them were particularly high-ranking rockets. They were the men who trained rockets before sending them out. Eric met the eye of one of his colleagues before stepping out of the group and approaching the platform. As he reached it, he grabbed a Pokeball and threw it, shouting out for the rockets to fight. Ash raised an eyebrow, as the rockets quickly realized what was going on and started pulling out Pokeballs and releasing Pokémon. Without needing an order, 10 of Ash's Pokémon threw themselves into the fight, the remaining 4 guarding the doors out of the room. Eric smiled in triumph as behind him more than 800 Pokémon were released. They formed groups, and started to face off against the 10 Pokémon arranged against them. Confident that weight of numbers would easily give him a win, Eric turned back to see his Raticate appear in front of him. As Raticate materialized, Ash's Sceptile surged forwards, smashing the Pokémon with a leaf blade attack that knocked it out instantly. Sceptile then hit Eric, knocking him out. Sceptile looked up from his first victory, to see a large group of Pokémon charging at him. A small smile crossed the forest Pokémon's face as he fired a bullet seed into them, sweeping it across the charge, causing maximum damage to as many Pokémon as possible. On the other side of the room, Snorlax stood next to Onix as more than 200 rockets lead sent their Pokémon to charge at the door they were defending. Snorlax waited for them to come closer, and then fired a hyper beam at the advancing Pokémon. The beam whipped across the charge, sending every Pokémon it hit flying. Snorlax grunted with disappointment. The Pokémon he was facing had no strength at all compared to what he was used to, his attacks were knocking them out instantly. As the hyper beam ended, Onix dived forwards, before changing orientation. He smashed into the rocket's Pokémon lengthways in a vicious takedown attack, colliding along a line 8 meters long. Onix's rolling took him through 6 lines of Pokémon before he rolled back the other way to avoid another of Snorlax's hyper beams. After repeating this twice, the 2 Pokémon stopped their attacks as the last of their opponents fell. The rockets facing them stood in shock. They had sent hundreds of Pokémon at just 2, and been comprehensively destroyed. The Pokémon facing them didn't even look tired. One of the rockets near the front slowly raised his hands into the air in surrender, an action soon mirrored by his comrades. Within a few minutes, the scene had been repeated across the room, the sheer power of Ash's Pokémon overwhelming the weak Pokémon that Team Rocket members had. Ash started to escort groups out of the room and to the buses, Espeon and Alakazam using their psychic strength to prevent the rockets from attempting to flee. As each bus was filled, one of Ash's Pokémon stepped inside to watch the rockets, all of whom were tied to their seats. It took him a while, but eventually Ash had rounded up every single rocket, and the buses started to drive away. Since some of his Pokémon didn't fit inside the buses, Ash had sent 9 Pokémon inside the buses with Rapidash running alongside the convoy. He kept Charizard, Snorlax, Onix and Aggron, recalling them all to the Pokeballs at his belt. He then turned back into the rocket base and went back to the command center. Ash was quickly able to hack into the system and find details of other Team Rocket bases. He found 3 other training bases, and then what he was looking for. The main Team Rocket base was located in Johto, hidden in plain sight. It was in Goldenrod City, a minor skyscraper in the city of huge buildings, but with more than a dozen underground levels. Noting the location, Ash turned and left the base, totally empty of any rockets. He had what he needed, and the breakthrough needed to track down Giovanni. The 2 trainers faced each other across the field. Sam stepped up as referee, before the 2 threw their Pokeballs out. "I choose you, Geodude," shouted Melanie, releasing her rock type. "Clefable, come on out," called Whitney. "Geodude, Magnitude," Melanie ordered. "Clefable, ride it out and use Ice Beam," Whitney countered. Geodude smashed down into the ground, causing it to rumble ominously. The shaking became stronger, and Clefable crouched down to try to ride it out. As the fairy Pokémon fired her Ice Beam, the shaking ground overcame her and caused her to fall, the Ice Beam fading. "Rock Throw," came Melanie's curt command. Rock slammed down onto Clefable, causing severe damage. Before Whitney could come up with another move, Melanie struck to finish the battle. Geodude, Double Edge. The rock Pokémon flew through into Clefable, knocking the fairy Pokémon to the ground once more, and this time she was unable to get back up. Whitney recalled her Pokémon looking at it sadly. "Clefable, I thought the training would help. Perhaps it's time for you to quit battling, you clearly don't enjoy it. I'll talk to you about it later." Whitney then turned back to Melanie. "Good start, but that was my weakest. You'll have to do better to defeat me." Girafarig, you're up. The long-necked Pokémon materialized, the head on its tail grinning back at Whitney, a look of fierce intelligence in its eye. It eyed Geodude and its eyes flashed. Girafarig, psychic, and don't let it go. Geodude, earthquake. Geodude started to descend to the ground to start its attack, but didn't quite reach. As the rock Pokémon came close, its progress was slowed, and then it was catapulted up into the sky. Grinning at her opponent, Whitney gave another order. Psybeam. A multicolored beam of light flew out and caught Geodude in a direct hit. Girafarig then let its psychic hold go, and Geodude fell to ground, crashing down, clearly knocked out, the fall being too much for it. Thanking her Pokémon, Melanie recalled it, and threw out another Pokeball, releasing a Mareep. Mareep, Thunderbolt. Psychic. Dodge. Mareep fired its electric attack at Girafarig and then tried to dodge the psychic strike. It wasn't quite quick enough to do both, being sent flying by Psychic as its Thunderbolt smashed into the long-necked Pokémon. Both Pokémon repeated their attack several times, becoming progressively more tired as the battle went on. Mareep, end it with Thunder. Girafarig, fire a Psybeam before it can get its attack in. Whitney's strategy nearly worked. Mareep fired a bolt of electricity into the sky before being hit by the multicolored beam of light which knocked the wool Pokémon out. However, before Whitney could celebrate, a Girafarig was hit by a bolt of lightning from the sky, sending the long-necked Pokémon to the ground as well. Both trainers grimaced before recalling their Pokémon and throwing out a final Pokeball each. Miltank, you can win this. Totodile, I believe in you. The two Pokémon appeared, one a small blue bipedal crocodile and the other a pink cow, with small horns. Melanie's eyes narrowed, she knew how powerful this Pokémon was, she could tell just by looking at it. Miltank, roll out, Whitney ordered. Miltank curled up into a ball and started to roll forwards, straight at Totodile. At a command from Melanie, Totodile dived sideways, before firing a water gun at Miltank. The jet of water hit Miltank, but the rolling was enough to divert it. Melanie gritted her teeth in frustration as Miltank rolled back at Totodile. Totodile left then water gun at the ground in front of it. Totodile moved to the left out of the way and then fired his water gun just in front of Miltank, causing the milk cow Pokémon to slow its spinning as it couldn't spin through the water. As Miltank came out of his ball, Melanie attacked again. Totodile, Hydro Pump. A huge torrent of water flew out, smashing into Miltank and sending the Pokémon sprawling across the field. On the sideline Sam winced, he knew what it felt like to be on the receiving end of that attack. Miltank slowly got to her feet, glaring across the field at Totodile. Whitney watched her Pokémon struggle to its feet, and then gave another command. Miltank, Sandstorm. Melanie gasped, as sand kicked up in the field. Totodile, use water gun to clear the area around you, and start to move towards me, she called into the sand. After a few moments she saw Totodile edge out of the sandstorm. Watching across the field, they settled down to wait it out. Suddenly the sandstorm stopped, and a white beam fired across the field from Miltank. With Melanie taken by surprise, and unable to command, Totodile instinctively fired a water gun straight into it that was rapidly up to a hydro pump as the white beam pushed straight through. As the hydro pump collided with Miltank's attack there was an explosion which hid the field once again. As the smoke cleared, Totodile was looking somewhat tired, but Miltank looked exhausted. Whitney looked at her Pokémon who smiled at her, before tucking into a ball once more. Miltank, roll out. Totodile, Hydro Pump. As Miltank came rolling at the big jaw Pokémon, a torrent of water crashed into him, only for Miltank to smash straight through. Totodile was unable to get out of the way quickly enough, and was sent flying. As Totodile hit the ground, Miltank arced back around. Totodile, Hydro pumped the ground in front of it. This time the water did stop Miltank, with the milk cow Pokémon being sent skidding back by the attack. Totodile now looked exhausted, but Miltank seemed barely able to stand. As the trainers watched, the milk cow Pokémon tottered on her feet before crashing down to the ground. Sam stepped forwards. Miltank is unable to battle. Victory goes to Totodile and Melanie. Melanie hugged her Totodile, before standing and offering her hand to Whitney, who shook it. That was a great battle, Melanie. You would have earned the plain badge from me had you faced me in the gym. Whitney said. Thanks. That was really tough. Your Miltank was really strong. She was my first ever Pokémon, and my strongest. Not many can beat her. Whitney broke off, causing Melanie's eyes to narrow. What's wrong? Melanie asked. Your way of firing water attacks in front of Miltank reminded me. Tell me, have you ever heard of a trainer called Ash Ketchum? Whitney asked. No, I don't think so. Melanie answered, looking to Sam and seeing a shake of a head there as well. No, why, did he beat you as well? Ash was a trainer who came through nearly 10 years ago. The first time he fought me he lost, but then he managed to trap Miltank using a Totodile to create ditches that disrupted rollout. That's why I taught Miltank Solar Beam. She needed a way to fight other than rollout. Whitney's eyes became somewhat distant. Ash went on to make top 8 in Johto, and then went to a different region. I never saw or heard from him again. Before either Sam or Melanie could answer, a fourth voice added itself to the group. Sam, Melanie. Turning around, the two young trainers saw a woman jogging towards them. She looked about 20, had shoulder-length brown hair and was dressed in a simple shirt and trousers. As she reached them, she came to a halt. Nurse Joy said you two were looking for some training. I need to talk to you. It was at this point that the newcomer realized that Whitney was staring at her. Whitney. I didn't think you would be interested in trainers. Just because I'm no longer a gym leader doesn't mean I don't follow things going on in Goldenrod. I still know as much as you, Olive. Whitney countered. The new Goldenrod gym leader grinned. I'm sure you do. Still don't want to come and train at the gym? No. Well, can't blame me for trying. Olive turned back to Sam and Melanie. Cynthia Sharona is holding a training camp for trainers based in Johto, and all the gym leaders are sending trainers that they feel are good. However, a couple of mine had to drop out, and so I need replacements. I don't want to lose any more of my trainees, so I wondered if you two would be interested in attending. It's a week long, at Indigo Plateau. Sam and Melanie stood stunned. Cynthia Sharona, the ex-Pokémon Master, and Olive thought they should go. Sam managed to croak out a question. Why us? Because, you both have a hell of a lot of potential and you're strong trainers already. You both beat me, and Melanie, you beat Whitney, no mean feat, Olive told them. One of my jobs is to keep an eye out for trainers like you, refer you to Cynthia. I spoke to her about it, and whilst she knows that you are both on a journey, she still would like to offer you the place. You are apparently good enough to already be tracked by her, though I'm not sure how. So, how about it? I need an answer quickly. Yes, I'll go. Melanie burst out. Sam looked at her, before nodding. Likewise. We would be stupid to turn it down. Wonderful. Olive smiled at the two of them. I'll inform Cynthia. If you come to the gym now we can arrange some transport for you. Whitney, good luck with the farm. With that, Olive turned and headed off, the two youngsters traipsing after her. Whitney watched them leave with a smile, and then turned to head back up towards her Miltank farm. She had milking to do, but having heard about the two trainers she knew she couldn't pass up the opportunity to meet them. Misty had been swimming when the call arrived. Lily had taken it, and then called for Misty. Answering the phone, Misty had been surprised to see Cynthia calling. What can I do for you? The redhead inquired. Come to Indigo. I need somebody to help teach at a training camp I'm running. I see. When nothing else was forthcoming, Cynthia started speaking again. Misty, I know that you were hoping for Champion to train you, but he has made it clear that you aren't strong enough yet. However, this training camp will consist of some of the strongest trainers in Johto, and you could learn a lot from it. Furthermore, you are one of the strongest water-type trainers in the world, and they could use your experience. Misty had been silent for a few moments. It was an honor to be asked, and it would make her a stronger trainer. Everything she wanted. There was only one answer she could really give. However, there were a few things she wanted as well. I'll do it, on a couple of conditions. Go ahead. Cynthia said, her face suddenly slightly wary. Firstly, I want to be able to bring Gary. Gary Oak? Cynthia asked, her voice betraying her interest. Yes. May I ask why? Cynthia asked. 2 reasons. He wants to get back involved in training Pokémon with him between research projects. The other is that he's my boyfriend. And don't worry, I'll vouch that he is still a good enough trainer. Misty's face was a picture of determination, something which Cynthia suspected it was on a regular basis. She knew about Misty's stubborn streak. Fair enough. Congratulations. Thanks. The other condition is that I want to be able to train with Champion for at least 1 day. I can't guarantee that, he is currently out of communication. However, I'll see what I can do. I suppose that's good enough. When do you want us with you? As soon as possible. Now, 2 days later, Misty was stepping into the accommodation block at Indigo. Beside her was Gary, dragging a pair of suitcases, whilst Pikachu, who was determined to come when he heard where they were going, behind them, dragging another, smaller suitcase. The couple was unsure how long Cynthia expected them to stay, so they had a fairly substantial amount of stuff with them. Looking around, both were impressed with the glamour of the building that they were staying in. Whilst most trainers who came to Indigo were given standard accommodation, Misty had been allocated a room in the more exclusive building. Usually it was given over to elites and champions, but Cynthia had managed to get Misty and Gary a room. Reaching the receptionist, Misty gave her name and was rewarded with a key to a room. Quickly finding it, they left their suitcases there, and went to the main administration building to find Cynthia. They were directed up to the 11th floor by the receptionist. Reaching her office, they found her slightly stressed. Is everything all right, Cynthia? Gary asked from the office door. Misty stood next to him. The blonde trainer turned to face them. Just stressed, I was busy making sure all the trainers arrive, and then a whole load more work appeared out of nowhere. Anyway, and she extended her hand to Misty and Gary. Welcome to Indigo. Misty and Gary shared a private grin. Cynthia looked every bit as stressed as they had when they had been organizing the new recruits in Cerulean. After shaking hands, Cynthia gestured to the chairs in front of her desk, before walking around and seating herself behind it. Now, the camp. Cynthia started. Tomorrow we will start training. I will be doing most of it, whilst Misty, you will be running a session for the water Pokémon. I should tell you that you aren't the only specialist here. I have managed to pick up specialists for fire, fighting, rock, steel and grass types. I'm working on getting specialists for the other types, but that won't happen before this camp. You may have heard of some of these trainers, they are certainly fairly well known. Misty and Gary sat listening to Cynthia as she explained the arrangements. They certainly seemed thorough. She explained how the camp would last for 2 weeks, longer than originally planned, but given the effort that she had put into organizing it, Cynthia wanted it to be worth it. And you, Gary, what will you be doing? Cynthia finally asked. I can help train any time, I don't specialize. I also am able to bring the benefit of my research to my instruction, something I believe you do as well. Cynthia looked at him, before acknowledging his statement with a wry smile. Before any of them could say anything else, there was a knock on the door. Suspecting who it was, Cynthia called for the knocker to enter. The door burst open and a young woman with blue hair waltzed into the room. She looked under 20, had a piplup on her shoulder and wore a pink skirt with a black shirt on top. A smile burst across her face as she took in Gary and Misty sat there. You two never told me you were going to be here. Dawn burst out, managing to give Misty and Gary both a radiant smile and an angry look at the same time. Not waiting for either of them to answer, Dawn turned to Cynthia. "I've spoken to Wallace, he unfortunately won't be able to come and sends his apologies. I should be able to manage without him, I've had plenty of practice battling over the years." "Thanks, Dawn. I appreciate this." Cynthia managed to get out, before the exuberant women could say anything else. "Oh, no need to worry, I'm happy to. I'm always happy to put trainers in their places, it's great fun. We're between contest seasons anyway, so taking a couple of weeks is no trouble." Cynthia looked at her computer screen before suddenly standing up. "I'm sorry to cut this short, but I have to go and see Champion. I'll come back when I'm done, my meetings with him tend to be short." She stood and strode to the door. "Oh, by the way, Dawn. You might want to congratulate the two of your friends." Smiling to herself, Cynthia stepped out. Gary and Misty looked at each other, whilst Dawn seemed to grow in front of them. Silently cursing Cynthia, Misty sheepishly looked up at Dawn. "So Misty," the brunette said, the tone of her voice intimidating the usually unflappable redhead. "Why might I want to congratulate you?" "Oh, just Gary and I are going out," Misty said, trying to brush it off as something minor. The high-pitched squeal from Dawn told her it wasn't going to work. "When? Where? Why didn't you tell me?" Gary held up his hands in surrender. "Dawn, if you just calm down we'll tell you, promise. We're not going to run away." Dawn took a deep breath, before stealing Cynthia's seat across from Misty and Gary. Leaning forwards on her elbows, she waited expectantly for the story to begin. It was the night of the gym inspection. Misty started. "Gary had been helping us with the whole thing, using his name to try to attract a few more trainees to the gym. He worked harder than I think he has ever worked in his life." At this point she grinned at her boyfriend who had grunted his disagreement. "Admit it, Gary, you hardly used to work that hard." "Yeah, but I did some work, Gary muttered back. "Anyway, after we passed, Gary asked if I wanted to go out to celebrate. I thought at first that he meant everybody involved, but it turned out that he really wanted to go out with just me. It was a great first date, though I'm still not sure if he could afford the restaurant we went to." "Trust me, I can," Gary grinned. "You're just not used to having money." Anyway, after she finally realized that I had been trying to get her to realize that I liked her for some time, I asked her if she would go out with me, and she said yes. "And to answer your over question," Misty butted in, before Dawn could start speaking. "We haven't told you because we haven't spoken to you in the last week. We were telling people when we spoke to them, instead of calling people up and telling them." Dawn looked at the two of them, before bursting into a huge smile. "Congratulations to both of you. Can I be the bridesmaid?" Gary and Misty just looked at each other and laughed. Ash Ketchum exited the elevator in the Pokémon League headquarters, striding towards his office. Under the building, there was a large group of police officers being coordinated by a dozen Officer Jennies, arresting the 592 Team Rocket members he had taken in his raid on their base. At his waist, Ash still had the Pokeballs containing some of his team whilst the rest of his Pokémon were watching the rockets, making sure that there were no more problems at the very end. As he reached his office, Ash sat behind the desk, finally letting tiredness reach over him. The raid on the training base had been nearly a week previously, the rest of the time being made up negotiating Kanto without anybody seeing. He had not slept for the duration, and his Pokémon had snatched what rest they could. As a group they were utterly exhausted, and he was only waiting for the final rockets to be taken into custody so he could go home and rest. As he waited he turned to his computer, looking over the events of the last week. He noted that Indigo had a lot more trainers in residence than usual, as they were all there for a training camp of Cynthia's. Ash brought up the list of trainers she had invited and scanned it quickly. He smiled to himself as he saw Sam and Melanie on there. Closing the list, he looked up as Cynthia entered the room, taking the seat opposite him. "Welcome back, Champion. I assume from the staggering number of rockets downstairs that your mission was a total success?" Cynthia asked. Yes, came the blunt reply. You are aware that we don't actually have enough cells for all of them. Indigo was never quite anticipated to be a prison. I know. They will be distributed to prisons across regions. There is a major prison for each region, there is more than enough space. I suppose. But even they aren't limitless, you can't arrest every rocket you see. I won't have to. Now I know the location of their headquarters, I will lead a team to capture the rockets there. The majority of rockets can be integrated back into society, only the leadership will have to be held permanently. As Cynthia's back straightened in surprise, she reflected that it seemed to happen every time she came here. Whenever she felt the need to visit her successor, he managed to surprise her. She supposed she should be accustomed to it by now, but he always seemed to be several steps ahead. Where is it? She asked, unable to keep the interest out of her voice. Goldenrod City. Before you ask, you will not be needed for this operation. So you're going in once again? Without backup? Ash looked up, showing Cynthia the darkness under his trademark hat. Whilst she couldn't see it, she felt the power of the gaze which was directed at her. You've seen my results, the Pokémon Master stated. Do you think I need help? Before Cynthia could answer, Ash stood up. The last of the rockets has been dealt with. I will be taking my Pokémon to rest, he said as he stepped towards the door. When are you planning the next attack? Cynthia asked him. In a few days. I haven't slept for a week, my Pokémon have had a few hours each in that time. We need to recover before we strike once again. Enjoy your training camp, Cynthia. Will you be able to help out with that? Just a day spent training with you would be worthwhile, I've never seen Pokémon looking as healthy as yours do downstairs. Cynthia called after him down the corridor. At the end of it, he turned and tilted his hat back, allowing Cynthia to see his eyes once again, the darkness in one and the dancing color in the other. I will join you on Thursday. And with that, he was gone. I'm not sure this is such a good idea, Mel. Why, Sam? We are good enough trainers to be here, otherwise we wouldn't have been invited. That guy we saw as we came in. Don't you know who he was? Melanie's look of confusion was enough to answer for her. His name is Aaron, the Silver Conference champion from last year. Sam explained. I didn't even know he was still training in Johto. That is the kind of standard that are here, we just don't compare. Melanie couldn't stop the look of surprise from sweeping across her features. She had heard of Aaron, but she hadn't recognized him. The two friends were sat in their room in the luxury accommodation at Indigo Plateau. The quality of the room, easily up at 5-star hotel standard, showed them how important this training camp was. Hearing that the Johto League champion was in attendance, she realized that she might be out of her depth, despite her confidence. Seeing the uncertainty on her face, Sam continued. And think about where we are. We are at Indigo Plateau. Sam put as much emphasis on the last two words as possible. You know, home of the Pokémon Master. What if he chooses to spend a day with us? Think we can even register on his scale? That got Melanie's attention. Champion had a fearsome reputation, he had taken one of the best water Pokémon trainers apart in her element and utterly thrashed Cynthia when he took her title. If they had to go up against him, they would be destroyed without him even trying. However, as soon as she had heard about the camp, Melanie had decided to do her absolute best. She had guessed that there would be some top trainers there, but she had promised herself that she wouldn't be cowed by them. As a result, she was determined to make sure that Sam didn't embarrass them. Look, just do our best. Melanie asked him. If you go into the training assuming you're the worst, you will be. Be positive and we'll see how we do. I suspect we'll be the youngest, so nobody will expect great things from us. She jumped off her bed, and bounded over to Sam who was sat on his own, before hugging the fretting boy. We'll be fine. Just don't push our Pokémon too hard. And the Pokémon Master? We've met him, which is more than I suspect most of the other trainers can say. Do our best, right? Sam Nod was clearly reluctant, but accepted the reminder of the promise that they two of them had frequently made when they were younger. As Melanie climbed off his bed once again, he got up and strolled to the window, looking out of it. Directly opposite his room was the main stadium, somewhere he was hoping to fight at some point. Looking down the street he saw a massive Pokémon Center which was clearly placed to service the stadium, as it was next to it, and attached. Looking the other way, he saw a large building which was the administration block for the Pokémon League. As he watched, he saw 3 people leave the main exit. One was a red-headed trainer, dressed in the blue that she had become famous for. She wore royal blue trousers, and a similarly colored shirt. Next to her was a man dressed in a pair of dark jeans and a loose white shirt. He had wavy brown hair, and had his arm round Misty as they walked. Just behind them, came a woman with blue hair, dressed in a pink skirt and a black top. Sam recognized the 2 women, but he wasn't certain about the man. Thinking quickly, he called Melanie over to the window. "Mel, who's that guy down there? I sort of recognize him, but I'm not sure." Sam asked. "Which guy?" came the reply as his childhood friend joined him at the window. "The one with Misty Waterflower and Dawn Hikari, the 2 women down there," Sam said, pointing towards them. "Oh, Gary Oak." Melanie answered, blushing slightly. "Thanks Melanie," Sam said with a grin. "You don't still have a crush on him, do you?" Melanie turned bright pink. Stuttering out a retort which Sam didn't believe for 1 second, she left the window and went back to her bed. Sam, still chuckling to himself, went back to his bed. "Wonder why they are here," he said to the air. "Who?" Melanie answered, not really listening. "Gary, Misty, Dawn. They are all famous. Dawn's the strongest coordinator around, whilst Misty is supposedly the best water-type trainer in the world. She could help you with Totodile, make him stronger. If they are still around." The girl muttered. Sam lay back on his bed. "Don't worry, I'm sure that this will benefit both of us. And who knows, you might be able to finally beat Kalava with Totodile again." The following morning, the 2 of them headed downstairs to breakfast. They were greeted with an impressive array of the most powerful trainers in Johto. Sitting slightly apart from the rest of the trainers, they ate a quick breakfast and then went to a large training room set underneath Indigo Stadium. The room had a large platform raised at one end with a microphone, but it looked slightly out of place, like it wasn't usually there. Before long all the trainers were in the room, chatting away with each other. Sam and Melanie felt overwhelmed, and saw some of the trainers looking at them in surprise that trainers of their age had made it. Before anybody came to ask them who they were, a door leading onto the platform opened and a tall blonde woman stepped out. Behind her came a group of people who lined up behind her. The tall woman stepped up to the microphone and cleared her throat. Silence fell across the assembled trainers quickly, and they all turned to look up at Cynthia. "Welcome," the ex-Pokémon Master started. "This is the first of hopefully many training camps that I will be running here at Indigo. You are all trainers who are currently based in Johto, and deemed sufficiently strong to train here. Behind me are some people you might recognize. They will be helping run the camp. However, before we get to business I need to inform you of the facilities here. You are in the training area given to the Pokémon Master under Indigo Stadium. The current Master, Champion, has given them to us to use for our training. Therefore, you can expect everything to be of the highest quality. Now, to the training. For the first week, you will be able to train where you please in this training area. Behind me are a series of specialists. Misty, who specializes in water types, John in fire types, Katie in fighting types, George in rock types, Lily in grass types and Aaron in steel Pokémon. I know that this is an incomplete coverage of all types, but each of these trainers understand far more than just their own type. Their specialty is in knowing the strengths and weaknesses of all types of Pokémon and using their own type to defeat them. In addition, there is Dawn Hikari, who I expect you will all recognize as she has won grand festivals in all regions multiple times. She will be able to advise in the art of making your Pokémon fight in the more attractive manner used in contests. This may seem unnecessary to you, but trust me, it can also make your Pokémon stronger. Coupled with that, Dawn is a sufficiently powerful trainer to be able to beat a large proportion of you. And the final person up here is Gary Oak, the researcher. He will be working alongside me in general training. Any questions so far? As Cynthia stopped talking, silence hung over the room. She could see the minds of trainers working hard as they thought about how they would spend the first week, either working to improve their mastery of all types, or in training in an individual type with a specialist. Casting her gaze along the trainers, she saw the two youngsters, a short way away from the rest. Guessing that this was the two youngsters that Olive had sent, she marked them down for watching. Cynthia was also happy to be able to put faces to the two names. She had been shocked when Champion had suggested that she keep an eye on Sam Fernandez and Melanie Rigger, and now a month on was pleased to see them in person. Judging the time to be right, and noting the absence of any questions, Cynthia started to speak once again. The second week will place more emphasis on each of you working together, alongside the specialists. Now, there are maps of the training complex, although it is very simple. There is a field for every type, as well as 4 combination fields that encompass multiple types that can be set before training. Each of the specialists will be working in their field, whilst Dawn, Gary, and I will be using some of the combination fields. If you wish to simply use the facilities without any help, that is your prerogative, but... Cynthia broke off as a door behind her opened once again. The shock on the faces of the trainers in front of her was enough to make her turn around. Stepping through the door was Champion. Dressed in black, trousers, a shirt, jacket, fingerless gloves and his customary hat, he strode onto the platform next to Cynthia. As all attention was settled onto him, he started to speak, his voice ringing out across the silent room. It is known that I do not like media attention. Do not bring any to myself or this camp. I will be observing whilst my Pokémon recover from recent exertions. Do not disrupt the Pokémon League whilst you are here. Respect the Pokémon who work with you, they are what give you your strength. He then strode back out the door he had come through, it swinging shut behind him. Cynthia watched, a small smile on her face. She knew that in a short speech he had made more impact on the watching trainers than she could with an hour-long speech. Turning back to the waiting trainers, she started to talk once again. As I was saying, should you desire to train alone, that is up to you, the facilities remain open to you. And as the Pokémon Master made clear, he does not want any media attention focused on this, it will disrupt both your training and his activities. As a final note, whilst he will be watching, if anybody impresses him, you might find yourself invited to a training session with him. That is all I have to say, other than enjoy the 2 weeks and good luck. Cynthia stepped back from the microphone as the respectful silence that everything had passed and was broken by the trainers discussing this latest piece of news. All the trainers looked excited, as they started to move off, heading into the arrangement of training rooms in the complex. Cynthia heard somebody clear their throat behind her, and turned around. So, Champion might be training them? Misty Waterflower said, an eyebrow raised. He said he might, Cynthia responded, knowing what the redhead was getting at. He was interested in the idea of teaching a few whilst he remains here for a few days. Have you asked him about training with me? Misty persisted. I spoke to him. Cynthia said, not giving anything away. And? You will spend Thursday with him. Cynthia said, placating the redhead. But please, this is supposed to be kept quiet, he will be working with everybody then. Misty nodded her agreement. Now, go do your job, Miss Waterflower. Cynthia said, pushing the redhead towards the door. There are trainers waiting for your wisdom. The screen flickered into life, the face of a man who was clearly terrified appearing in it. A chair swiveled to face the TV, the man sat in the chair hidden in shadow. The face in the TV started to speak. Sir, I've just reached the Kanto training base. It is completely empty. No sign of struggle, the whole place is spotless, just no people. Have you looked into the security records? A voice growled, emanating from the chair. They were wiped, sir. One of the techs with me says it can't be recovered. What about the terrain in front of the base? Tire marks, sir, and some deep hoof prints, like a Rapidash charging. Very well. Pull your team back out of the base, and come to Goldenrod. Yes, sir. The screen went black, throwing the room back into deep shadow. The man in the chair leant back, speaking into the darkness. So, somebody has managed to shut down an entire base. A small team would be essential, but to have no warning at all. Perhaps. Behind him a door opened, and a man stepped in, his head hidden under a hood. He wore a Team Rocket uniform, fitting perfectly around his lean figure. He bowed his head as the chair swung around to face him. Agent. Report, the man in the chair commanded. Sir, our informant at Indigo has gotten in touch. He felt it was too important to wait for his usual reports. A large number of rockets were brought in on buses yesterday. Guarded by the Pokémon Master's Pokémon. So it is him. Sir. Our Kanto training base has been wiped out. All the recruits have been taken somewhere. That will be where? The simple assumption is that the Pokémon Master is responsible. Yes, sir. But if he took the Kanto base, surely he would know where the Goldenrod base is from captured intelligence. Yes, Agent. And I suspect he will come alone. A trap will be set for him. You are our best since we rebuilt, you will be responsible for setting it. You may use all our assets, including that one. I want regular reports. You will have at most a few days, he won't wait long before striking. With respect, sir, he won't be able to attack straight away. To bring buses from the Kanto base would take at least 2 days, if he was traveling to avoid being seen it. Would take longer. His Pokémon wouldn't have had a chance to sleep, he will need to let them recover. The chair swung back away from the door in dismissal, and the rocket agent turned to leave. As he reached the door, he heard his boss's voice ring out one last time. Never underestimate the Pokémon Master, especially if he is who I think he is. The agent stopped in the door, but nothing else was forthcoming, so he stepped out, the door swinging shut behind him. In the darkness, Giovanni, the head of Team Rocket, smiled into the darkness. So, if you are who I think you are finishing the job you started 4 years ago. You nearly reached me then, but this time I'm ready. Come and get me if you dare, Champion. Misty stood facing the 2 trainers that had chosen to join her on the second day of the training camp. She had taken over the large water training area inside the training complex, and had spent the first part of the morning swimming with her Pokémon. The first day had been the hardest, since her recent battle against Champion had raised her profile. She had nearly a dozen trainers to work with the previous day. This, as she had complained to Gary at the end of the day, wasn't fair given that there were only 30 trainers to start with. And Johto didn't even have a water-type gym. She had done the best she could, but had been grateful to see that she wouldn't have to produce a repeat performance today. Unlike teaching back in Cerulean, this was harder work simply because the trainers tended to be more arrogant, but also because they were stronger. Some of them were nearly as strong as her. However, after she had been swimming for about 20 minutes, 2 trainers had walked in, a boy and a girl. Misty had swum to the edge of the pool, climbed out, petted Gyarados to stop him getting annoyed at the interruption, and beckoned the pair over. Looking them up and down, she realized that they were very young. Good morning. Are you 2 here to work with your water Pokémon? She asked them. The girls stepped forwards. Gary Oak suggested that we work with you today. We trained with him yesterday, the only 2 he had, since most people had either gone to you or Cynthia. I'm Melanie and this is Sam. Gary? Misty asked with an eyebrow raised quizzically. He didn't mention anything. I'll talk to him later. So why did he think that you should work with me? Because my starter is a water type. Melanie answered. And recently he has been somewhat stubborn. He still listens to me, but I feel like there is something wrong. Fair enough. Water types are what I do best. Misty said with a grin. Another thing, I presume you both are prepared to get wet. Gary did warn us, Sam said. Something about swimming. Correct. Join me in the pool when you're ready, and we'll see what we can do. Misty turned and dived back into the pool, Burritos taking up position on one side of her, whilst her Sea King swam on the other side. As the two youngsters started to strip down to swimsuits, Misty looked around the room she used for the training. It was completely dominated by the pool, which was at least 3 times the size of the one in the cerulean gym, with the pool more than 100 meters long. There were a few platforms, which could be moved, so she had set it up so that they were along the sides of the pool to be accessible but out of the way. It was perfect for her, and she found herself grateful that she had agreed to help Cynthia. A pair of splashes told her that Sam and Melanie had joined her, and Misty rolled onto her front to swim over to them, where they were treading water. As she drew closer, she noted how Melanie had left 3 of her Pokeballs on the side of the pool, and Sam had left one of his, as well as noting with approval that despite this they were still wearing their Pokeball belts. Alright, first, how good are both of you at swimming? Misty asked as she reached them. We're pretty good. We used to have races all the time when we were younger, Melanie said. Good. Then why don't you have a race to the other end and back? Misty said with a smile. Before Melanie could respond, Sam had exploded into motion, a front crawl causing him to move away from his friend at an impressive speed given his age. Melanie glared at him and was about to set off straight after him when she felt Misty's arm stopping her. Remember, you are a Pokémon trainer, in water. Use your Pokémon to help you. Melanie's face lit up, and she pulled out one of her Pokeballs, releasing her Poliwag. A quick word with her Pokémon caused it to nod, and Melanie set off in a front crawl, but without using her feet. Poliwag swam behind her and pushed against her feet, causing her to move quicker. Before she reached the end she had overtaken Sam, who, because Poliwag was hidden under the water, couldn't see what she was doing. Melanie turned, pushed off the wall at the end and started to race back, leaving Sam comfortably behind. As she reached Misty, Melanie started to tread water again, and Poliwag swam in front of her, bobbing around, happy to be in the water as well as beating Sam. As Sam got closer, the tadpole Pokémon swam into Melanie's arms, and then used its tail and feet to keep both of them afloat. As Sam reached them, he started to tread water again, as the two girls faced him grinning wildly. He looked at Misty, before his eyes traveled to Melanie and then to Poliwag, who was still happily grinning from her trainer's arms. You used Poliwag, didn't you, Mel? Sam asked. Melanie nodded. And let me guess, that isn't cheating, is it? Misty shook her head, with a wide grin still on her face. Not bad, Sam, you're a good swimmer, but to work well with water Pokémon you need to get the feel for what it is to be a water Pokémon. And that means swimming with them as well as training with them. Look at Poliwag, she is clearly happy to be swimming, and she is happy to be with Melanie. Water Pokémon are one of the types where it is possible to work with them in their natural element without any danger. I mean, you would be foolish to follow a fire type into a volcano, and it is hard to fly with a flying type, although not impossible, yet swimming is safe. The two young trainers looked at each other, a new respect for the specialist that they were working with evident in their expressions. Their attention snapped back to Misty as she started to speak once again. I noticed that both of you left Pokeballs on the side. I presume those are Pokémon that would struggle in the water. Sam and Melanie nodded. Smart. Why don't you release the Pokémon that you have with you that would enjoy the water? If they aren't water types, try releasing them onto platforms first. Sam started to swim towards the nearest platform, and released his Pokémon as he got closer. All 5 of the Pokémon he was carrying materialized on the platform, and looked around. They had been warned that there would be water involved today, but they hadn't expected to be released into the middle of a pool. Sam's Ghastly floated over the pool, whilst his Furret sat on the platform looking at the water dubiously. Pidgeotto and Butterfree took off, hovering over the pool whilst Wooper let out a sound of joy and dived into the pool, splashing around happily. Melanie on the other hand had simply thrown one of her Pokeballs to a different platform, where Machop materialized. He looked down at the water before seeing his reflection and started admiring his muscles. She then released her Totodile into the water next to her where he started to splash about. Misty suddenly rose out of the water by about a meter, riding on the head of her Gyarados. The head moved close to Totodile, who stopped splashing when confronted with the atrocious Pokémon. Totodile turned somewhat uncertainly to his trainer who merely gestured for him to listen to the women who sat on the Pokémon that was towering above him. "Well, you're certainly a strong Pokémon." Misty started, looking down at the big jaw Pokémon. "But your trainer says she's been having problems with you. Let's see. What attacks can you do?" The words had hardly left Misty's mouth when Totodile unleashed a hydro pump at Gyarados. The atrocious Pokémon, caught unawares, reeled back from the blast which was powerful enough to nearly knock him over. Recovering, he glowered down at Totodile, who simply grinned back. Misty, who had survived her Pokémon being knocked back, put a calming hand on Gyarados, before looking over at Melanie. "Totodile knows Hydro Pump?" Melanie nodded. "Interesting. Usually, Totodile evolve well before they learn moves that powerful." "Sam," the boy's head snapped around. "Your starter, is that a Johto Pokémon as well?" Sam nodded. "Can you show me?" Sam called out a command to Pidgeotto who swooped over the pool, before grabbing Sam's sixth Pokeball, and releasing Kalava on the side of the pool. The Volcano Pokémon appeared, looking out across the pool. Misty looked at him, and then turned back to Sam. "That is a powerful Pokémon, Sam. He looks almost ready to evolve again. How many gyms have you two taken on?" "3. Sam answered, before gesturing to his Pokémon to follow him as he swam over to Kalava, Furret having finally decided to try swimming. Misty turned back to Totodile. "Assuming that Melanie got you at the same time as Sam got Kalava, you should also have evolved. So why haven't you?" Totodile turned his head slightly, staring back at the water specialist, as if challenging her to work it out. Melanie was still treading water, with Poliwag still in her arms. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Machop still showing off to his reflection and she gestured for him to join them in the water. As the fighting type dived in and started to swim across, Misty suddenly jumped off Gyarados' head, landing next to Totodile. "Right. You clearly have a problem, but there doesn't seem to be a reason for one. Unless you are just being difficult." Misty suddenly stopped talking as a memory suddenly surfaced in her thoughts. Years previously, when she was traveling through Johto, a Totodile, belonging to her friend Ash messing around, clearly enjoying himself. She grinned as the solution struck her. Turning back to Melanie, Misty started talking again. "Let me guess, Totodile was difficult after a defeat. You started to focus more on training to make sure it didn't happen again, and Totodile started to be more difficult after that?" Melanie was shocked. "How on earth did you know all that?" she asked. "Because your Totodile wants to have fun. My guess is that he simply hasn't evolved because then he would be bigger and it might restrict him from enjoying himself. Let him have fun as well as training, and you should be alright." Melanie turned back to see her Totodile grinning, before kicking away and swimming across the pool. Smiling, she turned back to Misty who had a gleam in her eye. The water specialist gestured for them to join Sam on the side of the pool, and struck out, leaving Melanie to follow her. Ash stood looking out across the island he lived on. The island was a short distance away from Indigo Plateau, leaving him an easy journey to and from the Pokémon League's base whenever he needed to go. Those who had seen it called it Mystery Island simply because none of them had ever managed to get onto it. There was only one way in from land, which was along a bridge that had a gate that could only be opened by either psychic strength or by aura. However, it was so complicated that only the very strongest of either would be able to open it, Ash and his two psychic types being the only ones capable. To try to reach the island by water was even more complex as boats found themselves caught in vicious rapids that invariably ended up taking them away from the island. And the two brave men who had tried to fly onto the island had found themselves hit by huge winds that had forced them to head away, or risk being knocked out of the sky. As such, it was a perfect place for somebody who was as private as Ash to live. His Pokémon and him could live and train in peace, without having to worry about anybody. Crucially, in Ash's mind, there was absolutely no way that the media who dogged every Pokémon Master would be able to reach him. As such, he was perfectly able to relax there. Without turning, Ash felt Espeon stroll up behind him, the Sun Pokémon standing proud next to her trainer. Ash reached down and scratched her behind the ears, causing her to purr. Looking back out across Mystery Island, Ash started to speak. On Thursday we will be teaching some trainers. Espeon looked up, her eyes bright with curiosity. Yes, I thought you would be surprised. There are 2 trainers there who could be strong. They are young now, but with the right encouragement, they will become very strong. They would be good partners for us. Friday, we will start our strike at the heart of Team Rocket, giving us time to reach Goldenrod overnight. We will hit every floor that is above ground at once, before striking into the underground areas. There can be no place where they can escape, and this time we will get Giovanni. Espeon mewed quietly, and Ash turned his head to look down at her. I know, I suspect the same thing. I thought that he would know that we are coming, but that can't be helped. At best, we will just have to spring the trap, and move through it. If it is what I think it will be, then you will have to trust me. Espeon. Simple. If Giovanni knows that we are coming, he will have a guaranteed escape route. He will also try to trap me, and then let time wear the rest of you down. If you look like breaking through to him, he will simply vanish again, and we are back where we started. Assuming I'm right, you will pull out, and leave me trapped. When I know that Giovanni is present, and with me, I will send out a message that you will be able to detect. Alakazam can then teleport you all in, and we have Giovanni. Espeon looked up at her trainer, master and friend, worry written over her face. She knew that Ash was powerful, but she still feared leaving him in the hands of Team Rocket. The logic in his plan was sound, as it was the best way to guarantee that they would be able to capture Giovanni, but she still didn't like the idea. Ash, noting the worry in her expression, did not need her to talk to know what she was thinking. Espeon, this is one where you are going to have to trust me. If you stay nearby, you will be able to sustain a mental link for a short while, so you won't be cut off. However, ultimately, Giovanni will not want to risk his capture, so it could take a while for him to be sufficiently confident that he has actually subdued me. Patience will be key. Now, let us go see the others. Ash turned back towards his house, Espeon easily keeping pace alongside him. His Pokémon had all slept for most of the day when they returned, utterly exhausted from their work in capturing the rockets. Ash had been proud of them, they had done everything he could ever ask of them. However, he knew their loyalty to him. They would not enjoy the plan that he knew he had to use if he was able to capture Giovanni and finally end Team Rocket. Many of them still remembered his fury 4 years previously when he had fought his way through the rockets, Espeon at his side, and his other Pokémon fighting throughout the headquarters under Viridian Gym. When Ash had reached the room where they expected to find Giovanni, only to find it empty. There had been a tunnel, dug out at the back, behind a hidden door. Ash had smashed the door from its hinges, to find railway tracks, which showed him Giovanni's escape route. Knowing that to chase would be fruitless, Ash turned and strode straight back out of the room, to find his Pokémon. After he had collected them all, he assembled his Pokémon in front of the rockets that were still on their feet, which was definitely a minority. Looking back over them, he had seen the injuries to the 10 Pokémon he had at the time, all for nothing. His anger had cowed the rockets, and none of them had dared move until the police showed up to arrest despite the fact that Ash had left nearly 15 minutes previously. He had, however, taken the highest rank rocket that he had found with him, Domino. The Black Tulip had been unconscious when Ash found her, unable to take the impact of a Pokémon that Agron had sent flying into her. By the time Ash had found the rocket headquarters, she had been the rocket's second in command, and so was the alternative target given Giovanni's escape. Faced with Ash's anger, she had been terrified, but refused to talk about where her boss might be. At first Ash thought she was merely being brave, but after Espion had searched her mind, he realized that Domino simply didn't know. Giovanni had vanished into the wilderness. As a result, Ash had taken Domino to a police station and left her tied up. She was sufficiently well known by the police that she was arrested on the spot, and the Viridian police had remained quietly grateful that their cover-up of the whole affair was continued. What Ash's Pokémon would remember from the whole episode was the way he very nearly lost control. Espion had to restrain him because he had looked like he was going to kill Domino. When he forced the Sun Pokémon to her limit to restrain him, Alakazam and Agron stepped in. Between the three of them they had managed to restrain their enraged trainer, preventing him from taking revenge for their injuries which had been gained for nothing on the women in front of them. It was this that prevented Domino from even attempting to flee. She had decided that anybody who took 3 Pokémon to restrain was clearly not somebody that she wanted hunting her. Ash hoped to use this memory to persuade his Pokémon that he needed them to pretend to abandon him. Reaching the clearing behind the house where his Pokémon were resting, Ash stopped walking, and the Pokémon quickly lined up in front of him. After laying out his plan for the attack in Goldenrod, Ash held up a hand to forestall any complaints. "Before you all complain, hear me out," Ash said. "For years ago, we fought our way through hell, to find Giovanni had escaped. If we go about it the same way, he will do the same thing again. This we cannot permit. Those of you who were there will remember the way I reacted when I found that you had all been hurt for no reason. Now, I understand that none of the injuries were life-threatening, and that you have picked up worse in training. However, they were by far the worst injuries that you have ever had for no reason at all. As a result, I will not permit it to happen again. So, argue all you want, this is one time where I must ask for your unequivocal trust. And this time we will bring down Giovanni." Cynthia was stood on the platform in the same room that she had first addressed all the trainers on the first day of the training camp. Once again, behind her were the specialists that she had managed to assemble. Champion had, surprisingly, not commented on their use, and she suspected he enjoyed the idea as much as she did. At least she hoped so. In front of her were the trainers, assembled as they had been 3 days previously. The only difference was that stood next to her was the Pokémon Master, in his standard black clothes. The man who she had spent more than 2 months trying to understand and get to know, and failed miserably in both tasks. Unlike last time, when she had done the talking, Cynthia stood and listened as Champion stepped forwards to address the 30 trainers in front of him. "Cynthia has prevailed on me to spend a day helping with the training. That day is today. I will make something clear from the start. I do not have time to deal with those who aren't willing to listen. I will not repeat things. And if I suspect that you are wasting my time, you will regret it. Questions?" There was a silence so complete that it was deafening. Nobody moved, not wanting to be the one to disturb the greatest Pokémon trainer in living memory. Champion waited a moment, before starting to talk once again. "Proceed to the mixed fields." Cynthia winced slightly at the commanding tone, but nobody complained or even looked like they were considering it. Every trainer that she had invited to the camp had been eager at the opportunity to learn under her, a trainer that everybody had considered the best of a generation until Champion taken her title. Coupled with the chance to train under specialists who understood their type perfectly, and it was hard to say no. However, she knew that this was what they had all truly hoped for, the chance to train with the Pokémon Master. Misty in particular looked absolutely thrilled, having experienced firsthand how skilled he was. Pikachu, who had insisted on coming today, was looking equally eager, but he also had a hidden idea, to try to work out why the Pokémon Master seemed so familiar. As they reached the field, they found the 4 regions set up with 4 different types: water, fire, rock and a standard battlefield. The water field was a simple pool without any platforms, whilst the rock was equally standard across the majority of stadiums. The fire field was field of hot coals which had platforms suspended over it. Champion stood waiting for the trainers as they stood on the edge of the battle area. As the last one arrived, Champion gave a simple command. Those of you that have won, release a water Pokémon. Of the 30 trainers, only 9 didn't have a water type, and soon the water field was busy with Pokémon. Misty felt Champion's eye on her as she fingered her Pokeballs, and she chose to release her Dugong into the water. As the last of the Pokémon materialized, Champion held up his hand, a Pokeball in it, and released his Sharpedo onto the edge of the rock field next to the water field. All the water Pokémon instantly turned to face the brutal Pokémon, but Sharpedo scanned them until he saw Misty's Dugong. As the two Pokémon locked eyes, Sharpedo smiled at the sea lion Pokémon. Not the smirk it had on its face whilst battling, but a smile which was one between two comrades. Dugong blinked, then smiled back, before her attention was sent back to Champion, who was talking again. Water is fluid, and ever-changing, whilst possessing great power. Water Pokémon are among the most versatile when used properly, in particular their amphibious abilities giving them a whole new area to dodge into. However, the concept of an ever-changing machine is one that can be incorporated into battling. Particularly in the ability to dodge attacks, but fluidity is vital in moving from attack to defense and stringing attacks together. Observe. He then turned to Cynthia and nodded, causing the X-Master to turn to her Milotic that she had released. Milotic, Hydro Pump followed by Aqua Tail. The tender Pokémon raised its head before firing a torrent of water at Sharpedo. Sharpedo lurched to the side, to avoid the water before firing his own attack straight back, catching Milotic before she could use Aqua Tail. Struggling through the impact of Sharpedo's water gun, Milotic surged forwards, only to find that Sharpedo had dived into the water, using a weak crunch on Milotic as she passed overhead. Sharpedo then spun away from Milotic's second Hydro Pump, firing another water gun at point-blank range, sending Milotic crashing back into the water. Cynthia then called out for her Pokémon to use Recover, and to stop the fight as Sharpedo regained his original position. So, there you saw Sharpedo's fluidity. He dodged an attack before firing his own whilst still having enough time to dodge and attack again. Champion said. Sharpedo was holding his attacks back there, but you saw how hard it is for Milotic to fight back. The crucial part is when your Pokémon dodge is that they can then get an attack in before their opponent can recover. If they come out facing the wrong way, you have gained nothing. And when done properly, you will see that your fights become more visually inspiring, something of importance to both trainers and coordinators. A Pokémon fighting with the fluidity of water is a sight to behold as well as being very hard to defeat. You will be able to practice this later, but now your Pokémon have seen and heard, recall them. The trainers did as he ordered, their faces showing their concentration as they listened to Champion. He moved away from the water field after recalling Sharpedo, and stepped towards the fire field. As the trainers assembled around it, they were ordered to release the fire types that they had. Once the fire Pokémon were stood on the hot coals, Champion released his Charizard, who stood at the center of the field, tall and proud. Champion then turned back to the trainers. Fire itself is dangerous, possessing incredible power but can be hard to control. Trying to get fire to do what you want can be a long, difficult task. Fire Pokémon are similar in nature, often capable of the most powerful attacks, but fire types are notoriously hard to control. With these Pokémon, trust is vital to being able to use them effectively. Once you have Pokémon their trust, you need to work on timing. If you are able to have them strike at the right moment, they can be devastating, but at the wrong moment and it is wasted. Observe. This time it was Cynthia's Garchomp that had been chosen to help with the demonstration, and at a command from Cynthia he fired a flamethrower at Charizard, who dodged with a smooth turn. As Garchomp continued to try to hit Charizard, Champion turned back to the trainers. At the moment Charizard is merely dodging to try to get no advantage. This is useful at times, but works best when your Pokémon are able to dodge using the least possible effort, like Charizard is now. The lesson from the water can then be applied, and Charizard can dodge and strike back with devastating force from a position where he won't miss. For this example, Charizard will strike an area to the side of Garchomp, as the intention of the lesson is not to injure Cynthia's Pokémon. Turning back to his Pokémon who was still dodging, Champion gave a command. As the next flamethrower streaked in, Charizard suddenly jumped, allowing it to pass immediately under him. Before the attack even reached where he had been, Charizard struck back, a devastatingly powerful blast burn attack scorching an area 10 meters to the side of Garchomp who couldn't move since he was still attacking. Despite the distance, the power of the attack could be felt across the room, and Garchomp visibly reeled backwards at the impact of it. Charizard then settled back to the ground as if he hadn't moved, whilst Champion turned back to the watching trainers. Here you saw Charizard not get hit once whilst he struck back with overwhelming force as when the chance presented itself. The concept of a devastating strike comes most naturally to fire Pokémon, so I am demonstrating it with them, but with sufficient work any Pokémon is capable of it. And dodging is something that any Pokémon is capable of doing, even one as large as Charizard. He didn't use his wings once, and yet dodged some 20 flamethrowers. Now, recall your fire Pokémon. As the trainers did so, Champion recalled Charizard and stepped over to the rock field, letting the trainers follow. Champion told them to release rock or ground types, which they did, before releasing his Onix. As the rock snake Pokémon reared his head, Champion turned to the trainers once again. Rock itself is unyielding, never giving way and being resolutely stubborn. Rock Pokémon are notorious for their ability to endure attacks. This, once again, is something that can be taught to all Pokémon, regardless of type, although this is one of the harder things to teach. However, the hidden strength of the rock type is in the ability to strike multiple times whilst enduring a hit. If you attack Onix and he dodges and strikes back, he gets in one attack which you might not be able to dodge. Yet if Onix knows that your attack won't hurt him at all, he will endure it and strike back 2 or 3 times if he is quick enough. Once again, observe. Cynthia had sent Garchomp across to face up against Onix. The Pokémon had volunteered to do as much of the training as possible, simply because he wanted to prove to the trainer who had beaten him that he was powerful. Champion had agreed, since Garchomp was capable of most of what he needed. As Garchomp faced up to Onix, Cynthia called out another attack. Garchomp, Mud Shot. As the stream of mud fired from Garchomp, Onix fired off a rock throw before using Earthquake. Garchomp was unable to dodge either as he was still using his own attack, and since he couldn't dodge, found himself hit by both. Getting back up, he looked at Onix, the Pokémon unfazed by the hit he had taken. Their Onix demonstrated that by taking a hit, he can get in 2 of his own. Garchomp was unable to dodge because he was still attacking. Proceed to the last field. Recalling Onix, and gesturing for the other trainers to do the same for their Pokémon, Champion strode over to the final field, the standard field. Turning to the trainers, he released his Altaria, and then gave instruction for them to release any flying Pokémon that they had. The last aspect that I will cover is simple, dodging. If you are up against a stronger opponent, a good strategy is to wait for him to make a mistake. Whilst you do that, you cannot let him hit your Pokémon. The best Pokémon at dodging are flying types, simply due to their extra dimension in which to move, the sky. Whilst the other aspects are vital, being able to dodge is crucial in both maximizing the usefulness of the water's fluidity and the fire's power. If you can dodge effectively, you can use the fluidity of water to move between attack and defense as well as the raw power of fire to make each attack count. Observe. Garchomp started firing flamethrowers up at Altaria, who dodged with ease. Cynthia released her Milotic once again, and soon water attacks interspersed the fire attacks racing into the sky. Altaria dodged them all with ease, barely doing more than slipping side to side. Turning to the trainers, Champion ordered them all to release a Pokémon that was capable of long-range attacks, and to move their flying types out of the way. They quickly did so, leaving Altaria still dodging Garchomp and Altaria, whilst a flock of flying Pokémon watched from the side, and 30 more Pokémon stood watching from the ground, with the specialists not releasing any of theirs. Now order your Pokémon to attack Altaria. Champion said. Tell them to keep attacking until I order them to stop, and then watch. Misty blanched at the instruction, realizing that Altaria was going to be forced to dodge more than 30 Pokémon attacking at different times, with different attacks. They might collide and explode, and other things that could be problematic. Feeling a weight leave her shoulder, Misty glanced down to see Pikachu watching Altaria, his cheeks sparking and a look of determination in his eye. He glanced back at Misty, with a smile, before focusing on the dodging Pokémon above him. Suddenly, all the other Pokémon except Pikachu who were on the ground started firing attacks up. Left, swerve up, dive, spiral up, loop down, race right, champion started calling up to Altaria, who followed his instructions to the letter. As time wore on, the trainers stood in awe of Altaria, as she successfully dodged the attacks minute after minute. As she got close to the ground, Pikachu fired his own electric attack up, which Champion was able to give a command to dodge, much to the electric Pokémon's annoyance. After nearly 10 minutes of dodging, Champion called a stop to the attacks. Altaria floated up in the sky, before descending to the center of the ring of Pokémon that had tried to knock her out of the sky. Barely breathing heavily at all, Altaria looked around at the Pokémon who had clearly felt the strain of such constant attacking. As the trainers stared in disbelief, Champion spoke once again. What you just saw is a Pokémon who is good at dodging. When your Pokémon trust you to be able to guide them to the extent Altaria does with me, it is very hard to hit. The problem being with endurance, which is the second to last thing that I shall discuss with you. Your Pokémon must be physically fit, or they will struggle to be able to use all aspects of their fighting abilities to the greatest extent. For example, my Pokémon are capable of running long distance as well as firing attacks at a faster rate than yours were and for far, far longer. If you are unable to get your Pokémon to be as fit as they can be, then you will struggle to emulate what I have taught you here. As for how to teach this to your Pokémon, that is going to have to be for you to work out. I will say however, that some Pokémon are naturally good at certain aspects of what I have shown you, so you may wish to work with that type of Pokémon. The final thing to consider in battling is strategy. This is something that certain trainers excel at, such as Cynthia. If you want an example from my own fights, watch how Miss Waterflower's Gyarados was defeated when she challenged me. Champion stopped speaking, and recalled his Altaria before striding away from the room. Cynthia recalled her Garchomp and Milotic before starting to talk once again. I think Champion has just shown you something very valuable, not to say impressive. He will be around for the rest of the day, although he may not choose to make another appearance. His suggestion was that each of you go and train in the way that you wish for today. The specialists will not be instructing today, and I intend to take my Pokémon for an intense training session, particularly with respect to what I've just been shown. I suggest that you do the same. So you see, May, 2 of your friends have chosen to go against me and help out the Pokémon League that removed me from my job. Look, Dad, I don't care what you think at the moment. Firstly, Misty and Dawn went to go help Cynthia, the person that maintained your post as Petalburg gym leader. Secondly, in his inauguration speech, Champion did state that he would be expecting gyms to train young trainers. There is no reason why you couldn't, yet you didn't. Thirdly, I would have thought that you would have seen that he was serious when he had Price thrown out of his gym. May was getting exasperated. This was the 3rd time in a week that her father had called her to try to get her to agree with him that he was wrongfully dismissed from his post. Equally, he had called Max twice in the same PRD to try to get him to agree. This time had been to tell her that her friends Misty and Dawn had gone to spend 2 weeks working for Cynthia at the Pokémon League. It would have surprised May if they hadn't both spoken to her after their arrival, to make sure that he was alright with it, given that the Pokémon League had replaced her father. May was a little upset that he had been replaced, but she felt that perhaps he did somewhat deserve it. Over the last few years Norman had gotten more and more complacent in his role as gym leader, and May had heard mutterings around Petalburg City that he was neglecting some of his responsibilities. When she had first heard it, the Princess of Hoenn had been furious, but when she had looked around the city she realized that the stories might be right. There were some very poor regions in Petalburg, and Norman hadn't done much to help out. When May had spoken to her father about it, it had led to the worst argument that she had ever had with her parents, and eventually she had stormed out of the house. It had been 2 weeks before she spoke to her mother again, and nearly a month before she agreed to talk to her father. Before Champion's inspection of the gym, she had known that a large section of the city was a breeding ground for dissent as there was high unemployment coupled with poor infrastructure. It wasn't like the city authorities, i.e. Norman didn't have the money available, he had merely focused on his gym at the expense of the city. And from what May had heard, when Champion came calling, he had destroyed Norman's 2 most powerful Pokémon with a single attack, exposing the folly on which his arrogance was built. So whilst May was upset that Norman had been removed from his position as gym leader, she was also very grateful that the reason given was that he had not been teaching other trainers, and that there had been no mention in the papers that he might have been responsible for the decline of parts of Petalburg City. There had been rumors that Erica had been removed from Celadon after she had simply failed to manage the city's affairs sufficiently well, and May had feared that something similar would happen to Norman. There had been a considerable backlash against Erica, despite the lack of a confirmed rumor, and May was grateful that her family had avoided something similar. The fact that there wasn't she thought was enough. She didn't need her father constantly trying to persuade her to take an anti-League stance. But May, surely you can see that I have been mistreated? I should never have been replaced, it's... Norman persisted, before being interrupted by his daughter. Dad! May shouted, finally losing her temper. I told you the first time, and I'll tell you for the 10th time, I will not support you in this. Drew and I are staying out of things at the moment, and frankly, when I warned you that you needed to devote more time to your other responsibilities you blew up in my face. Face the facts. You alone are responsible for this. Norman suddenly looked upset. Is that really what you think, May? He asked. Yes, Dad. I'm really sorry that you were replaced, but I think that to an extent you brought it upon yourself. Very well, May. I'm sorry you think that, but it's clear that you've made your choice, Norman said, before hanging up. May threw her hands up in exasperation. Her father could be so irritating when he felt aggrieved. As she settled back in her chair, she felt hands start to massage her shoulders. Sighing in relief, she relaxed as Drew continued to massage out the stress that invariably came with a call from her father. Are you all right? Her concerned boyfriend asked. Yeah. I think he's got the point now. May replied with a small smile. At the moment I see no reason to join his crusade against the Pokémon Master. Good, Drew enthused. Because your little brother is insisting that you go out and battle him. He seems to be under the impression that you promised him the chance, and if you are considering rejoining contests you could use the practice. May grinned, before standing up, and giving Drew a quick kiss before they headed out to the field just outside their house in Little Root Town. She had taken the decision to train for contests once again after her and Drew had gotten fed up of Dawn's bragging. Drew had commented with their Pokémon being as healthy as they could make them as they had had little else to do since they had dropped out of the circuit, she would stand a good chance. A bit of training would get them contest ready once again, and May could then compete with Dawn and see if she really was as good as she said she was, or was just lacking some competition. They suspected that Dawn really was that good, but May and Drew had a few tricks that they had developed, so felt quietly confident that May might be able to cause an upset. Totodile, dodge left and then water gun. Melanie called. Kalava, flamethrower. Sam countered, a smile on his face. The stream of water from Totodile was engulfed by the larger fire attack, causing the room to fill with steam. Totodile remained alert, and dived to the side to dodge the flame wheel that Kalava had attacked with. As the big jaw Pokémon dodged, he turned and fired another water gun after his opponent. As the steam cleared, it was evident that Totodile had missed with his attack, as Kalava looked totally unhurt. The two youngsters had spent nearly 2 hours working with their starters on how to dodge. Melanie had found it far easier, with her Totodile being an excellent dodger already. Sam had a much harder time of it, with Kalava not being anywhere near as skilled at dodging. Totodile seemed to take a kind of pleasure from dodging the attacks of his counterpart, whilst Kalava seemed far more inclined to simply attack. However, with the effort that the trainers were putting in, Kalava was improving, but the style jarred against Sam's own way of battling. They were now testing their results against each other in one of the training rooms where they were alone since most of the other trainers were in one of the main rooms. During the battle, however, Sam had used the fact that Kalava had greater power than Totodile to block Melanie's attacks and frustrate her, with a great deal of success. Totodile, close the distance. Kalava, end it. As Totodile ran at Kalava, the volcano Pokémon reared up on its heels and fired a huge torrent of fire at Totodile. The big jaw Pokémon suddenly dived to the side, but Kalava was able to redirect his flame and land a heavy hit on Totodile, sending him reeling backwards. The water type struggled back to his feet, only for a voice to ring out. Stay there, Totodile. Champion was striding across the room towards the two youngsters, a magenta cat padding along beside him. As he reached Totodile, he put a hand on the Pokémon's head. Under the eyes of the two trainers, Totodile's injuries faded away and he quickly got up with a grin. Champion turned around to face the two stunned trainers. What you just say was a simple healing of a Pokémon. Do not discuss that with anybody else. Understood? When Sam and Melanie nodded, Champion started talking again. Good. Melanie, what were you doing when you had Totodile charge in there? Sir. When you attacked, you were charging at a Pokémon which clearly has a great deal of firepower. Why? Air. Melanie was lost for words. Throughout the battle she had struggled to get a clear hit on Kalava, so when she was trying to carve out an opportunity. Before she could stammer anything else, Sam stepped in. Sir, knowing her style as I do, I think she was trying to force Kalava to attack and leave an opening for Totodile. The way that he dodged when Kalava attacked nearly worked, but Kalava and I have trained for him to be able to sustain his most powerful attacks for a little bit longer in case opponents try to dodge them. Sam fell silent as Champion focused on him. Stepping past Sam, he stood in front of Kalava, who rubbed his head against Champion's leg, remembering the man that had been kind to him before he joined Sam. As he petted the volcano Pokémon, Champion sent his aura into the Pokémon to see if what Sam said was true. What he found was an unusually large ability to hold quantities of energy, which did indeed mean that Kalava would be able to sustain his attacks for longer. Turning back to the two trainers, Champion started to talk once again. From what I saw, you've been working on dodging. May I ask why? From what you showed us today, it seemed to fit Totodile the best, Melanie said. He has always enjoyed dodging, he treats it like a game. I see. Champion said. And Sam? I thought the way your Charizard was able to dodge was awesome. Kalava thought the same, so we agreed to work with Mel on it. So you both do it because your Pokémon enjoy it? Well, yes, Sam said. Isn't that the point? You said it yourself, respect the Pokémon. Champion tilted his head slightly, to look at Sam. He then turned and strode across the room, to stand in the trainer's box facing the two young trainers. Realizing what he wanted, the Sam and Melanie looked at each other in fear. Kalava and Totodile glanced at their trainers, and then at each other before taking a stance facing Champion. Totodile, are you sure about this? Melanie asked, only for the big jaw Pokémon to nod at her. Watching from across the battlefield, Champion looked over his shoulder. Espion, this one is yours, he said, before raising his voice to talk to the two trainers on the other side as the cat padded out into the field. This isn't a battle, don't worry. I'm testing to see how good you are at dodging, and even fighting back if you get the chance. Espion won't fight at full strength, and her attacks will be held back. See how well you do. As his opponents registered what he was actually doing, the gem on Espion's head glowed, and a small beam fired out of it. Totodile instinctively dived out of the way, but the beam followed him, catching him and sending the water type sprawling across the floor. Kalava, flamethrower, Sam ordered. As the Pokémon fired a fire attack at Espion, the sun Pokémon just lazily looked at him, before firing her own attack that collided, stopping the stream of flames in its tracks. As Sam reacted to this attack, another weak Psybeam fired at Totodile, who had regained his feet. Totodile, dodge left, Melanie commanded. Kalava, help Totodile by attacking Espeon. Sam ordered. As the two Pokémon followed their trainer's instructions, the Psybeam flying at Totodile suddenly changed direction to target Kalava, as two more flew from Espeon arcing around to hit Kalava. Sam, however, was very quick to react to the incoming strikes. Kalava, flame will backwards, he called, with his Pokémon reacting instantly, and the Psybeams missing the target. As Kalava arced around, Espeon's Psychic threw him across the field. The battle continued in this way for a few more minutes, with neither Totodile nor Kalava able to get a clear shot at Espeon, who was toying with the, as she had been ordered. Melanie and Sam were able to keep their Pokémon away from most of the attacks, but the occasional one came through. After a while, Champion called a halt, allowing Sam and Melanie a break from having to coordinate their Pokémon so closely. Watching them carefully, Champion could see that they were tired, and their Pokémon had begun to struggle at the start. Striding across the field, he put a hand on each of their Pokémon to restore the energy that they had lost, before approaching the trainers. Not bad at all. You should be proud, your Pokémon are well trained, and clearly trust you. You have both been trainers for just a few weeks and yet you both have 3 badges and Pokémon who trust you. I think that these two will help you for today. As he finished speaking he took out 2 Pokeballs, handing one to each of the trainers in front of him. He then walked past them, Espeon at his side as he left the room, leaving the 2 youngsters staring at the Pokeballs in their hands. With a shrug, Melanie released the Pokémon in hers, before Sam did the same. They watched with awe as champions Charizard and Sceptile appeared. Before the trainers could do anything, Sceptile stepped forwards and started to talk quickly to Totodile and Kalava. I see you passed. We were left with you to teach you what we can. Sceptile said. Passed? Kalava asked. The fighting you were just doing was a test. Between us, Charizard and myself will teach you what you were shown this morning. We are capable of all of the aspects that your trainers were shown. As the forest Pokémon stopped talking, Totodile and Kalava turned back to their trainers. Over the time they had been together they had found that the best way to get a message across to their trainers was to talk whilst miming the motions. After a few minutes of this, Melanie and Sam had gotten the idea, and released the remainder of their Pokémon, who lined up in front of their 2 instructors. Right, said Charizard, speaking for the first time. Who thinks they can hit as hard as me? James arrived late at night with Meowth in tow, after Champion had left for Goldenrod City. They was directed straight up to Cynthia's office, where the ex-Pokémon Master greeted them. Thank you for coming, James. I appreciate it. Cynthia started. It's not every day that somebody like you requests me to visit, and especially not in with the criteria. May I know why I couldn't arrive earlier? James said. If you had, Champion would know. He still might, but he won't be able to do anything about it. So what don't you want him to know? He is attacking a Team Rocket base. James and Meowth shared a stunned glance. As far as they knew, Team Rocket had collapsed years ago. They had been among the few to notice the sharp decline in crime. They had gone with Jesse to the old headquarters and found them deserted. To hear that the organization had resurfaced was shocking. James' face sharpened in realization as he worked out what Cynthia wanted, something that she didn't miss. Yes, James. She said. I know you are an ex-Rocket, and so I need information. What we discuss here is not to be talked about anywhere else, understood? You too, Meowth. They both nodded. Good. This is all classified, but 3 weeks ago Gym Leader Faulkner in Violet City, Johto, found a cadre of Team Rocket grunts stealing Pokémon. He took them into custody and alerted us that the organization has resurfaced. Since then we have hidden the information from the world as we try to deal with them quietly. 2 weeks ago, Champion found a recruitment station in Celadon City, which gave him the information he needed to launch an attack on a base on the edge of Kanto, taking the whole base captive. From that base, he found the location of their main headquarters, and has just left to assault it. What I need to know is simple. Is there any chance that Team Rocket could know he is coming and set a trap? James sat quietly for a long moment, before turning to Meowth. Meowth, I have an idea, but you were closer to the boss than I ever was. Do you know of anything like this happening before? Nope. The Scratch Cat Pokémon replied. Nobody attacks Rocket. Clearly somebody does, James said drily. My thoughts would be that if Giovanni knows that the recruitment base was attacked, he would be able to work it out. And if he knows that, he is smart enough to set a trap for any would-be attacker. So the worst-case scenario is that he not only knows that there is an attack coming, he will be able to plan for it, and potentially catch the attacker. Cynthia persisted. Yes. All I can say is that Champion has some good backup. In fact, I would have thought he would take you. Why hasn't he? He is attacking alone. Cynthia said bluntly. James visibly paled at this news. He knew just how well guarded the Rocket headquarters was. Whilst an intruder might be able to get inside, they would surely be overrun by the guards. If he is attacking by himself, he will most likely be overrun by rockets. James said. No, he won't. He took out some 600 rockets at the training base without any problems. If all he has to face is rockets, I think he will win. Do you know if there will be anything else he has to fight against? Cynthia asked. Sorry, nothing we are aware of. Very well. If it's not too much trouble, I'd like to ask you to remain nearby until we know for certain. Of course. May I know where the headquarters are? Goldenrod City. Thank you. Standing up, James shook Cynthia's hand, and turned towards the door, beckoning for Meowth to follow him. As they walked out, he started to mentally plan how to get his own source of information from Jessie, who was still in Goldenrod. He didn't want to tell Cynthia, but perhaps he could find out some more about the elusive Champion, whilst still keeping his ear close to the ground to find out about the demise of Team Rocket. Ash stood watching the building. This was behavior that would be odd for anybody at 4 in the morning, but it was especially strange given his lack of movement. That coupled with the way that the shadows around him meant that he was virtually invisible, just looking around a wall, and the rockets inside would have been very interested to know that he was there. Beside him, but around the corner, there was a flash. Alakazam, Beautifly, and Ninetales appeared. Turning to look at his Pokémon, Ash raised an eyebrow at Alakazam. 12 floors above ground, 16 below. Minimal guards upstairs, heavy security down, the Psy Pokémon said. Ash nodded calmly. Beautifly then fluttered to his shoulder and started to mutter into his ear. When the Butterfly Pokémon was finished, Ash looked down at Ninetales. Smell of Pokémon and human, nothing else, the Fox Pokémon said, whilst stretching. No traps? Ash asked, with all his Pokémon shaking their heads at him. Ash nodded again before turning on his heel and striding away, the Pokémon following him. He had been watching the building that Team Rocket had hidden their base under, and had sent the scouts in. To his surprise, they hadn't been able to find a trap, which he took to mean that it was hidden beyond their capabilities to find. That alone surprised him. His scouts were among the best in discovering traps, but he couldn't believe that Giovanni hadn't set one. As the group reached a small park, he turned back to his scouts. Right. Giovanni, is he there? Alakazam nodded. And no sign of a trap. Another nod. Only smells of Pokémon and humans. This time it was Ninetales who nodded. This is odd. Espion. At his command, the Sun Pokémon slunk out from where she had waited. She moved up alongside him, and fixed her gaze on Alakazam. Thoughts started to flicker between the two of them at lightning speed, with Espion opening her end to Ash. Something feels odd, Espion started. A lot of Pokémon were there. Alakazam said. They could have hidden something in the crowd, even we can't pick out anything special. Pokémon won't be able to stand up against us, Espion said. Enough numbers. Split us up. I don't know. Did you find evidence about them knowing about Kanto? Yes. One of the executives was thinking about a way to replace the losses there. Apparently they needed the recruits we captured. Really? Espion asked. Did he say what for? Some plan they had. He didn't know the details. Giovanni would, but we can't reach him. Tomorrow, Alakazam said. Indeed. Anything suspicious? I don't want to have to go in again. I'm afraid not, Alakazam said. Suddenly ashes cut across the two psychic types. Nobody is going back in tonight, he said firmly. Tomorrow we will spring the trap, and as long as you're ready we will be fine. Alakazam, whatever happens, you must stay with me, that is the only way you will know when to flee. The Psy Pokémon looked at Ash, not particularly happy with the plan. Ash just chuckled. I know you disagree, but this is non-negotiable. You all know that I can break out when I want, and you will the one bringing everybody back in when the time is right. We will succeed this time. Giovanni was sat in his dark room when the door behind him opened. As his chair swung around, the agent who was in charge of catching the Pokémon Master stepped in. He is in the city, sir, the agent said. No scouts found him? No, sir. We only know because of him. I see. How did he get in? We don't know, sir. Guess. On foot? Maybe underground? Honestly, sir, if it is the Pokémon Master, it could be any way at all. Are you ready for him? Yes. However, I must request you have a way out if he breaks through, sir, we can't lose you. I do. Dismissed agent. Giovanni swung his chair back around to face the screens in front of him. They were showing him the security cameras from the whole building. When Champion broke in, he would know about it instantly. There was no way that he could be taken by surprise. And the trap was ready. However strong the Pokémon Master was, Giovanni knew he wouldn't be ready for what was prepared for him. Smiling to himself, he whispered into the silence. I'm ready for you, Champion. You will regret ever attacking me. Ash was back in front of the building. The sky was beginning to brighten, but he didn't take any notice. He turned back around the corner, nodding to the Pokémon who were there. Alakazam's eyes flashed for a moment, and then all the Pokémon vanished, except Alakazam. Ash then strode forwards, reaching the entrance to the door that opened in front of him. Inside it looked like a standard office. Ash nodded to the receptionist as he strode past, before she suddenly slumped onto her desk. He raised an eyebrow at Alakazam, who remained stonily impassive. As they moved through the relatively small ground floor, few men who were around collapsed as Alakazam used a psychic attack to overwhelm them. As they finished, Espion, the lift doors opened and Espion stepped out. We are bringing down the 12 people upstairs, she said, bringing a nod from Ash. Within 10 minutes, all the people captured upstairs were arranged on the ground floor, tied up and knocked out. Ash strode back towards the lift, seeing that there was one button to level, he turned back to his Pokémon. Well done so far, but they will know we are here. When we get downstairs, you know what to do. Any rockets we see knock out and we'll deal with later. Stay close where possible, but listen for orders. His Pokémon nodding their agreement, Ash recalled all his Pokémon, and then strode into the left. As it descended, he was ready to release his team and have the fun begin. He is here. Yes, sir. I expect him to take the lift down. Intercept him as soon as possible. Minimal damage. Yes, sir. Grunts will deploy whilst I get him ready. Giovanni nodded, and turned to regard the screens once again. He was impressed at the audacity of the Pokémon Master, to simply stride in, and knock out the few people he had upstairs. As he watched the lift that his opponent was in descend, he permitted himself a small smile. He was right, The man attacking was the Pokémon Master, and his Pokémon were almost the same team that had nearly ruined everything 4 years back just with a few additions. His instincts were still good, and this time he had a weapon to make sure that he was victorious in the struggle. On his screens he watched a force of nearly a dozen rockets sprint down the corridor and take up position facing the lift. They all released Pokémon, ready to attack when the doors opened. As he watched, the lift came to a stop, and the doors slowly slid open. The surrounding Pokémon all fired in attacks, and the room was filled with smoke. Suddenly a series of beams flew out, hitting the Pokémon surrounding the lift. Many of them were sent reeling backwards. The last thing Giovanni saw was the silhouettes of Pokémon materializing in the smoke before the feed from the camera died. Ash stepped over the prone bodies of the rockets. His Pokémon were all out and they had easily dealt with the Pokémon who were waiting for them. Glancing down the corridor he saw another group of rockets start to move towards him. Nodding to Rapid Ash, Ash let the Fire Horse Pokémon go racing towards them. The speed of the incoming Pokémon left the rockets no chance to try to avoid the attack, and sent them flying. Gathering his aura around him, Ash started to run down the corridor, his Pokémon firing attacks into every room they passed before catching up again. They moved through the first floor with incredible speed, Ash not bothering to slow down as his Pokémon systematically knocked out every rocket that they came across, whilst dealing with all the cameras. As he reached a set of stairs leading down a level, Ash came to a stop. Within moments his Pokémon had appeared behind him once again. On the floor behind him were the stricken bodies of nearly 100 rocket grunts. Ash gestured to Alakazam who tried to teleport to where Giovanni was hidden, but the Psy Pokémon shook his head once again. Whatever interference Giovanni had, it was too strong for Alakazam to break through without something to focus on. Ash then leaped forwards, dropping down the entire flight of stairs in 2 bounds, and hitting the floor at the bottom and rolling before coming to his feet. In front of him was a shocked rocket grunt who had clearly been about to lead the squad behind him up the stairs. As his jaw dropped at the sight of the figure in front of him, the Pokémon Master's hat still in place, he didn't see the fist flying towards him to send him flying through the air, taking out 2 of his men in the process. As the remainder desperately fumbled for Pokeballs, Ash stepped forwards, his Pokémon fanning out behind him. Giovanni watched the invader's progress, no emotion on his face. Inside his head on the other hand, he was terrified. Last time this had happened, he hadn't a chance to watch the progress. This time he had a map of the facility on one of his screens and he was watching sections of it turn red as the cameras were taken out. Whenever Champion appeared on the cameras, the feed appeared on a different screen, but it rarely lasted more than a few moments. What was evident however, was that Champion was a master of battling, not just with Pokémon but by himself. Giovanni had watched more than a dozen rockets think that they could take him in a fight, only to be sent flying within moments. The man's movement was inhumanely fast, his strength staggering. Coupled with the sheer power of the Pokémon backing him up, and Giovanni was very grateful that he had been able to set a trap. Even now he was wondering if it would be enough to stop the onslaught. As he watched, Champion charge straight down another flight of stairs, down to the 9th floor of the basement, a voice crackled in the speaker behind him. "Sir, the trap is ready. He will be taken on the 10th floor." Giovanni nodded to himself before speaking out loud, letting the speakers built into the room pick up the noise and send it back to the agent. "Very good, Agent. Have you been tracking his progress?" "Yes, sir. And I'm glad we have this asset, or we would be in serious trouble." Giovanni didn't bother answering, as he watched a huge section of the 9th floor turn red on the floor plan. Suddenly he saw the cameras pick up a figure moving straight towards the stairs down another level. Behind him were half a dozen Pokémon. Giovanni wondered idly why the cameras in this section hadn't been knocked out, as well as wondering why the invader was moving ahead without half of his Pokémon as they were still clearing the 8th and 9th floors. And as the man leaped down the stairs, and came up rolling, all the cameras covering the entirety of the 10th floor and above suddenly cut out, leaving Giovanni in the dark. Ash came out of the roll, as his Pokémon landed beside him. Espion and Alakazam both looked at him, they knew that this was it. Espion's psychic had just knocked out all the cameras on the floor, and there were nearly 20 terrified-looking rockets in front of them. Agron and Charizard stepped forwards, both firing off huge attacks. Had Ash not been prepared, he might very well have been hit when the two attacks suddenly reversed straight back at him, but he dived out of the way just in time. Coming back up, Ash was suddenly jerked forwards by a powerful force. Espion growled and he started to slide back towards her. As the conflicting forces pulled him, Ash gritted his teeth against the pain before he looked Espion in the eye. "Espion, get out of here. There is nothing else you can do. Get out of here and come back to save me." As the words came out of his mouth, Espion relinquished her hold, despite nearly winning the psychic battle, and looked at Alakazam, who crossed his spoons before all of Ash's Pokémon in the facility vanished. Without any support, Ash started to slide towards the rockets, before he came to a stop at a junction in the corridor. A shadow passed over him, blocking out the lights from the ceiling. As Ash looked up, he saw a tall figure towering above him, standing at 2 meters tall. The figure was heavily armored, with only one part of him not covered. It was his tail. Behind the helmet, the figure's eyes glowed blue, and Ash was jerked to his feet to look into the armored face of a Pokémon he thought he had seen the last of 4 years previously. Mutwo. 4 years earlier. The legendary had been attacked by Team Rocket, who had used the same machines to try and subdue him that had been used at Mquina, merely more advanced. Despite the fact that he was still resisting the torture, Mutwo had no strength left to try to escape, and so was unable to stop his captors from transporting him towards Viridian City. He knew that if he got there, they would find a way to completely subdue him, and his freedom would be completely gone. Resisting for so long had exhausted the legendary, and he knew he was only a day or so away from Viridian. Mutwo was resigned to his capture, and had only resisted out of his fury at having to serve Team Rocket once more. It had been clear to the Rockets who were escorting the van he had been transported in that he was being slowly broken. Mutwo had been in the dark, too weak to even send his mind out to work out where they were, with only the noise of the van moving to focus on. That and the sound of the machines attached to the inside. As he listened, Mutwo suddenly felt the van stop. Shouting from the driver. An explosion. Mutwo suddenly started paying a lot more attention, a new reserve of strength surfacing. He stayed in the van, listening hard. He heard the sounds of Pokémon attacks, lots of them. As Mutwo waited, the number of attacks started to decline, until suddenly there was a series of massive explosions. The van rocked back and forth before settling back on its tires once again. Mutwo waited, and suddenly the doors of the van burst open, and sunlight shone in. A figure stood at the door, only a silhouette against the light. Another silhouette appeared beside him, before a brilliantly colored beam flew into the interior of the van, shattering the 4 devices along the walls. Released from the machines that had tortured him, Mutwo dropped to the ground, landing on all 4s before slowly climbing to his feet. As he looked up, the figure was gone from the entrance to the van, and so Mutwo stepped out of his prison, into the sunlight he thought he would never see again. The back of a van was pointing up a hill, evidently twisted from the road, and in front of Mutwo was the figure that had freed him. 10 Pokémon stood in a line behind him. Slowly turning, Mutwo surveyed the wreckage of the convoy behind him, before turning back to his rescuer. Ash stood there facing the Pokémon in front of him. Mutwo stood tall, but the injuries to him were. Behind him were the wrecks of more than a dozen vehicles, the bodies of many of the drivers still in the burnt-out wreckage. The rocket convoy had been totally wiped out by Ash's Pokémon and Ash himself. Rockets lay on the ground, many of them dead. The ferocity and surprise of the attack had completely and utterly overwhelmed the Rockets, despite the large escort. Ash had personally added 3 to the body count, in addition to those he had only knocked out. Mutwo looked him in the eye, recognizing the trainer that he had last seen years earlier at Mount Quina. As Ash watched, Mutwo's strength finally gave out, and he slumped to the ground. Ash had left medicine for the legendary to help him recover, along with a large quantity of food. Mutwo had tried to find him to thank him, having released the clone Pokémon into the wild some time earlier. A month later he had been flying in a remote region when he saw ruins. Dropping down, Mutwo found that it was a Team Rocket base. In the aftermath of this discovery, Mutwo had gone back to Viridian City. He had stood in the ruins of the Rocket headquarters, and tried to work out what had happened. An organization that had the power to snatch a legendary couldn't just collapse, yet collapse was what had happened. What eventually clued Mutwo in was the lack of bodies. When he had woken up again after his rescue, there hadn't been a single body or any wrecks of vehicles left. The whole area had been cleared by Ash. Inside the Rocket headquarters was the same, so Mutwo assumed that it was Ash who had attacked it. He never found the trainer again. Present day. Mutwo stood watching the trainer to whom he owed his life. It was the early hours of the morning, the day after the failed raid. Ash was attached to the wall by manacles around his wrists. Behind him was the same machine that was built into Mutwo's armor. It sent an electric charge into the target's body. In Mutwo it encouraged obedience by the simple reasoning of if he tried to resist, the charge in his armor was enough to seriously injure the legendary, potentially even kill him. It also kept him weak enough to prevent him from forcing it out quickly enough to stop it overwhelming him. The one behind Ash was enough to keep the trainer in a degree of pain, but not enough to cause permanent damage. If he tried to resist, however, the charge would be turned up massively. The Rocket who had secured the manacles around him had told him so. Ash wasn't particularly inclined to test it out. There were 4 Rockets stood outside the cell which was in one of the lowest levels of the Team Rocket headquarters, with Mutwo stood outside. Tentatively, the psychic legendary sent out his mind, wincing as the trainer on the wall jerked in pain. "Sorry," Mutwo said telepathically, without the guards knowing. "If I had known it was you, I would have refused and faced the consequences." Inside Mutwo's head, there was an image of Ash, his body stance neutral, a shadow across his face. "It's fine. How did they catch you?" Mutwo sighed. It was embarrassing for him to be captured by Giovanni again. "Bad luck on my part. Giovanni was apparently looking for me, and I just managed to walk straight into a squad of his Rockets. Before I could stop them, one of them informed their boss of what they had found, and next thing I knew there was a fleet of helicopters heading for me. I was worn down over time, and a Pokémon of theirs managed to get this helmet onto my head. It has the same thing that is in your back, just it was turned up far higher. In the time it took me to get rid of it, they managed to attach more, and soon I was caught, having to try to fight off the Rockets whilst enduring the pain. It was too much. When I woke up again, Giovanni was there, telling me that I would serve him, or he would kill me. Each of the pieces of my armor has one of these devices, and I can't disable them all simultaneously. Their constant charge prevents me from getting back to full strength." "If you were at full strength, could you get out?" Ash asked. "I think so," Mutwo answered. "But that won't happen. They are sure to make sure that I can't regain strength. The power in the suit's circuits is enough for that." An image of a grin flashed in Mutwo's mind. It was at this point that Mutwo realized something. Despite the fact that he was closely linked to Ash's mind, he couldn't feel any pain radiating from the trainer. Yet when he watched Ash, he could see him writhing in apparent pain, something that the guards had noted. Equally, for somebody who wasn't psychic, Ash seemed to have an excellent grasp of mental communication. Now suspicious, Mutwo started questioning the captive once again. "Why aren't you in pain?" the psychic legendary asked. "I'm blocking it." "Don't tell them, I can only block so much." Ash replied. "Block? But you're not psychic, how can you block something like that?" "Correct. Suffice it to say, I have ways." Mutwo stood staring at the trainer who still twisted as if he was in pain. His acting was superb. If Mutwo didn't know, he would assume that Ash was feeling every bit of the pain that he should be. And there was something else wrong with him. The first 2 times Mutwo met Ash, he had been surprised by the amount of emotion that ran through the trainer. Now he could feel nothing. Emotion simply didn't seem to be part of his makeup anymore. Mutwo reached out with his mind again, surprised to feel another presence withdraw as he touched the Pokémon Master's mind. Unable to work out what the second presence was, Mutwo decided to focus on his conversation with Ash. "I am sorry for getting you in here," Mutwo said, trying to apologize once again. "I'm here," Ash said, cutting the legendary off. "You can get out." "I can't. If I try, the suit electrocutes me. When I insult you, use your tail to start to strangle me." "What? Are you insane?" Ash didn't bother to answer with his mind, merely glaring at Mutwo and speaking out loud. "You know, Mutwo, it's funny. You were losing the tug of war when I ordered my Pokémon to pull out. A single psychic type able to beat you. I thought you were supposed to be strong." Instinctively, Mutwo growled with rage, raising a hand to strike at Ash. As he realized what he was doing, he lowered his hand, and let his tail to snake out and wrap around Ash's neck. As soon as it made contact, Mutwo felt himself getting stronger. Energy was flowing into him, and suddenly, Mutwo realized that there was more than enough to overload the armor and allow himself to escape. Behind him, he heard a loud cough. Spinning around, his tail still wrapped around Ash's throat, Mutwo saw a screen with Giovanni's face in it. The man looked pleased, as if he had just gained something important. "Mutwo, if you could not murder our guest, I would appreciate it." Relaxing his tail, Mutwo stepped away from Ash, who groaned, the marks around his neck clearly visible. Mutwo stalked away from the cell, before focusing his attention on the screen, where Giovanni was now addressing Ash. "Champion. Nice of you to join us," Giovanni said. "Giovanni." Ash replied, his voice totally devoid of emotion. "I apologize for Mutwo's actions. I suggest that you refrain from insulting him, he seems to take them personally. Perhaps he objects to his own captivity." Giovanni's face smiled tightly. He moved his arm, pushing a button off screen. Ash suddenly screamed in pain, as the charge flowing into him trebled. Casting his mind into Ash's once again, Mutwo found to his surprise that the amount of electricity that Ash was deflecting was greater than he himself was being subjected to. To his even greater shock, he found that none was getting through to Ash. The screen was faked, making Mutwo reflect that Ash was a stunningly good actor. As Giovanni pushed a different button, Ash flopped down in the manacles, before raising his head once again. "I suggest more strongly that you refrain from angering me," Giovanni said, his lip curling. "I don't have the same restraint when it comes to me being angered." Ash remained silent, which seemed to amuse Giovanni. "You know you will be missed," Giovanni taunted. "I might reveal that you fell into a trap and were captured, I might make it look like you defected. Without you able to counter the story, what Team Rocket says will be believed. And with you removed, the Pokémon League is currently leaderless, and has nothing that can stand up to Mutwo, or our numbers. You have caused the collapse of the Pokémon League with your captivity. And to think you thought to strengthen it," Giovanni tooted. "I guess even the best intentions can end badly. I'll talk to you again soon, champion. After all, you're not going anywhere." The screen went back. Mutwo turned back around, before linking his mind to Ash's once again. "Champion. My name is a secret Mutwo. You are among a very small group that knows it. You're Pokémon Master and nobody knows who you are." "Yes." Mutwo regarded the trainer, and when nothing else was forthcoming, he turned away. The psychic type stalked up the corridor away from the cell, before walking up to topmost basement level. When he felt that there were no rockets in the immediate vicinity, Mutwo sent out a wave of psychic energy from his body. Every single one of his piece of armor flew off, hitting the walls. Stretching in relief as for the first time in months Mutwo was free from being electrocuted, Mutwo suddenly heard an alarm going off. His face was utterly expressionless when he turned to face the squad of rockets who raced around the corner, responding to the alarm. The leader of the squad took one look at the armor on the floor and paled. Before he could give any commands to his squad, or even release a Pokeball, all the rockets were lifted up from the ground and sent crashing into the wall behind them. Mutwo then raised a hand to the ceiling above his head, which promptly collapsed, giving him a route to the ground floor. Floating up, Mutwo looked around. The area he had come up seemed fairly empty, with not a single human in sight. Flying at the doors, Mutwo opened them with a psychic attack and flew out, exiting into the deserted city, before flying into the sky. Back in the cell, Ash heard the alarm, acknowledging it silently. He had at least managed to get Mutwo out safely. The Pokémon's distrust of humans should make sure that the legendary was out of the way until he had dealt with Team Rocket. A knock on Cynthia's door caused her to groan out loud. She hadn't wanted to be at the office so early, but she hadn't had quantities of paperwork had piled up from the various gym leaders and their trainees, and the camp had made it hard for her to keep up. Raising her voice to be audible to the person outside, she called for them to enter. As the door swung open, Cynthia was busy scanning a report from the Cinnabar Island gym. Without looking up, she started speaking. "Take a seat, I'll be with you in a moment. I suggest you give me your full attention now, Cynthia," a voice spoke inside her head. Slowly lowering the report, Cynthia's head swung around to see a large bipedal Pokémon stood there, its arms crossed and its eyes glowing a bright blue. The report fell from Cynthia's hand as she realized just what was in her office. The Pokémon lowered its head, before reaching out to her mind once again. "I am Mutwo. In the absence of the Pokémon Master, Champion, I believe that you would be the best person for me to talk to." Cynthia just stared. It took a lot to surprise her, but this had completely stumped her. To meet a legendary Pokémon was rare, to talk to one rarer. To have one walk into your office and start a conversation was unheard of. All Cynthia could do was a weak "ah." "I didn't think this would be so hard." Mutwo mused. "This is important, so say when you're ready." Cynthia nodded, before shutting her eyes, rubbing them and opening them again. After deciding that there was a Pokémon in her office, talking to her, she started to calm down. Having finally gotten a grip on her thoughts, she leaned back in her chair, resting her arms on the rests, gesturing for Mutwo to try again. Finally, the legendary complained. "I need to talk to you about Champion. Realizing that Mutwo knew who Champion was, Cynthia was suddenly more alert. "Why?" "Because he is being held captive inside a Team Rocket base in Goldenrod City." "I know, he told me where he was going." "What do you mean held captive? How was he captured?" To Cynthia's surprise, Mutwo's head bowed, almost in shame. Her mind now working at full speed again, she was quick to spot the connection. "You captured him, didn't you? You were the trap that Team Rocket were going to set." "Indeed. I had been held captive with them for some time, and they had a way of ensuring that I did as ordered. A painful way of ensuring it. I was the one who restrained Champion so that he could be tied up." Before Mutwo could say anything else, Cynthia held up a hand, before realizing that Mutwo wasn't technically talking. Despite this, the Pokémon got the message and stopped speaking into Cynthia's head as she picked up the phone on her desk, quickly dialing in a number. "James. Hello, sorry about the hour. I need you to come into the office as soon as possible. I need some advice from you with regard to the problem." A pause. "Yes, something has come up regarding Champion. Another pause. "That would be a good idea. Thank you, James." Putting the phone down once again, Cynthia turned back to Mutwo. "How did you escape?" "I am unsure." Mutwo replied. "Something Champion did restored my strength to beyond the point where I could break out. I don't know how." Cynthia looked hard at the Pokémon, before deciding that he was telling the truth. Another mystery for her to try to solve. "Can you tell me everything? I presume you are informing me so that he can be rescued." "Yes." "Right. In that case, anything you can tell me about where he is being held is crucial." When we are done here, I will start assembling trainers to join me in a second assault. Mutwo tilted his head slightly, regarding Cynthia before stepping away from the door. He stood facing Cynthia once again, who was still sat behind her desk, before reaching out with his mind to talk once again. To attack the rocket base, you are going to need a lot of trainers. Inside there are 12 floors above ground and 16 below. The ones below contain 6 dormitory levels, giving the base a theoretical capacity of nearly 3,000 rockets, although there was never that many there. At most I saw several hundred, although many of these are high-ranking rockets, so harder to defeat. Mutwo kept talking into Cynthia's head, describing how Ash was being held, as well as the way that he had been captured. Cynthia was typing furiously on her keyboard, writing down anything that she felt important. As Mutwo finished detailing the defenses, as well as the location of Champion's cell, the phone on Cynthia's desk rang. Hello. Yes, send him up. Tell the specialists to start without me today, I have things to sort out. Thank you. Putting the phone down once again, Cynthia fixed her attention back on Mutwo, as he confirmed that there was nothing else to say. The door behind the Pokémon swung open, and James and Meowth stepped in, jumping in surprise when they saw Mutwo, although recognizing him from events on Mount Quina. As Cynthia gestured them towards chairs in front of her desk, she sighed. Today was going to be a very, very long day. Espion sat at the window, looking towards the Team Rocket headquarters. It bemused her to think that she knew that the man who her trainer was trying to reach was in the building, and her trainer was captive there, yet she couldn't do anything about either. When Ash had told her the plan, she had instinctively argued against it. The idea of leaving him for that length of time was something that jarred against her. In the last 7 years, she had never gone more than a day without seeing her trainer. Now it had been 5, and every time she talked to him, she was told she had to wait longer. She understood the logic, having been with him when they finally reached the crime boss's office 4 years earlier to find that he had escaped, but it was still hard. She had barely moved from the window in all the time since his capture, using Psychic to bring her food to her. It was a mood mirrored among all the Pokémon that had been with Ash on the day of departure. The ones that had joined him since then loved their trainer, but they hadn't seen what lows he had sunk to. No words could convey the raw emotion that had been invoked in the Pokémon and their trainer that day. It was the reason that the Pokémon that had experienced it remained by their trainer always. They refused to leave him alone simply because they wanted him to know that they would never leave him. Equally, the fury that these 5 Pokémon held for those that had left wasn't really mirrored among the 9. Over the last 5 days these 4 Pokémon had waited together, missing their trainer. Their anger towards Team Rocket for splitting them apart hadn't been sated in the first attack. When their master gave the word, they would fall on Team Rocket like a flood, to the point where they would barely need the other Pokémon. Behind Espion the rest of the Pokémon were killing time. In their trainer's absence they couldn't train, not knowing when they might be needed. As a result, sat in the apartment that Ash had rented, they were killing time. Many of them chose to wait in their Pokeballs, leaving Espion, Meganium, Charizard, Sceptile, Snorlax, Sharpedo and Alakazam together waiting. When it was time to move, they would release the rest of the Pokémon before having Alakazam teleport the team to the room where Espion could feel Ash's mind. Without that help, they doubted that they would be able to teleport in accurately enough. Meganium came up next to Espion, putting a vine around the neck of the Sun Pokémon. They all felt the pain that was emanating from Espion, not least because they felt it themselves. Meganium retracted the vine and turned back into the room, leaving Espion to her solitude. When she reached Sharpedo, the brutal Pokémon gestured for Meganium to follow him. After walking into a different room, Sharpedo turned to Meganium. "What is it with you all?" Sharpedo asked. "It's like there is something special for all of you about having Ash away from us. I don't understand." Meganium's eyes watered as she regarded her friend with a sad look. "You weren't there the day that the rest of the Pokémon left us. You can't understand." "But what happened?" Sharpedo pressed. "What was so bad?" "Remember Sharpedo, Ash had left all his friends. He had left his only family, all he had was his Pokémon. One of those Pokémon was Pikachu, his first and the one that he had spent every minute of his life with since he was 10. All of those left him, led away by the one he thought he could trust above all the rest. Broken does not even begin to describe how he was. Espeon and I love him. Not in the way that you all do, you love him because as a trainer he has shown you nothing but kindness. Espeon and I would die for him in an instant. Before you say that you would do the same, would you? Without thinking at all. If he was in danger, can you honestly say you would jump straight in, not thinking about anything, just focused on dragging him out alive, even if it killed you? That is what I would do for him. He has saved my life, did you know that? He has also saved Charizard's and Sceptile's lives. Let alone what he did for Espeon, I don't even know her story. He had done it for many of his former Pokémon, only for them to leave him. That kind of pain cannot be put into words. On that day, I saw the human I love above all others broken by somebody he thought he could trust. On that day, those of us left made a promise. We would protect our trainer to the death, keep him as sheltered as we could. He was young, and had been through so much, it wasn't fair for anything else to happen to him. That is why we are so subdued. He is being effectively tortured, and we are forced to sit here and do nothing. Meganium spat the last word, which shocked Sharpedo. The brutal Pokémon had known Meganium for years, and she had never shown this, more ruthless side to her nature. As he processed what he had been told, Meganium turned and started to leave the room. Meganium, he called after her. She turned back, a sad smile on her face. I'm sorry. I didn't know. I know, the herb Pokémon said. You couldn't. And you still can't understand. You weren't there. And she left the room, using her vine to shut the door behind her, leaving Sharpedo to reflect on what he had just heard. Ash Ketchum was a patient man. Years of solitude had given him that, he never needed to rush for something. When he thought back to how he had been when he was younger, he was embarrassed at how he ran around everywhere. His impulsive nature had rescinded as the years went by, making him far more reserved. When he was young, Ash had felt that by rushing everywhere, he could get more done. He now knew that there was a time to rush things, and a time for patience. Currently, he was in need of every ounce of patience that he possessed. Every time Giovanni called him, Ash remained impassive, not baiting the rocket leader, but trying to make him feel secure enough to come and gloat in person. He had to act like the captivity was taking its toll. He had already worked out that Giovanni was scared of him, and for that reason, his patience was being tested. His plan relied on Giovanni coming to see his captive, and thus far, that wasn't working. His opponent was very suspicious. Espeon talked to him fairly regularly, but they were short conversations. Otherwise, he had little to do but think. It was no surprise that his patience was being tested to the extent that it was. After the last communication with Espeon, Ash felt mildly guilty. The Sun Pokémon was struggling, her loyalty being tested to the fullest. Ash knew that his Pokémon hated leaving him alone, and in the hands of Team Rocket would be almost unbearable for them. Espeon's loyalty fell back to the first time he met the Pokémon, when she was still an EV. Unbidden the memory started to rise, and Ash let it, thinking that there was little else to do, and a distraction would help. Flashback. 3 months after he had left home, Ash stood watching his Pokémon rest after their training session. Pikachu had returned to his place by his master's side. Their training had started a couple of weeks earlier, after Ash's Pokémon from around the regions had reached him. Charizard had been the last one to return, after him Ash was sure that there would be no more. He had started training the next day, beginning with a run that left him and his Pokémon utterly exhausted. The area that had found to train in was secluded, a valley with an easily-to-climb cliff at one end of it. The cliff was where Ash was able to watch his Pokémon from whilst they trained, and where he stood now. He had just finished preparing food, which, whilst he acknowledged wouldn't taste as good as what Brock could make, after a day's hard training, it seemed to suffice for his Pokémon. Looking over the valley, Ash saw something in the distance. He looked down at Pikachu. Looks like smoke, Pikachu. Wonder what it is. The electric mouse looked up at his trainer, guessing what was coming next. I'm gonna go take a look. Pika. Pika, Pikachu. Ash chuckled, scratching his Pokémon behind the ears. Nah, don't worry, Pikachu. Eat your dinner, you've earned it today. Scrambling down the cliff again, Ash strode out into his Pokémon, all of them looking up from their food to track him. Ash reached his bag, and picked it up, before turning to face his Pokémon, Pikachu leaping off his shoulder and heading to his own bowl of food, waving as his trainer headed off. Guys, I'm going out to check something. Some smoke in the distance. I wanna know what's causing it. Keep eating, I'll be back soonish. Shouldering his bag, Ash turned and started to jog in the direction of the smoke. It turned out that the smoke was further away than Ash had realized. It was after nearly an hour where a tired Ash climbed up a hill, to see a man in front of a forest. There was a Charmeleon stood there, using a flamethrower on the trees. In front of him were the burnt-out husks of several trees, with Charmeleon setting fire to another. The trainer was glaring up at something in the uppermost branches of the tree. He was focusing so intently on what he was doing that he didn't notice Ash creeping up behind him. Stupid Pokémon, thinks it can do that to me. The man muttered. Following the man's gaze, Ash saw a small brown thing in the tree, and hearing what the man said, it clicked what must be happening. Quickly shrugging his backpack off, Ash raised it before smashing it across the back of the man's head, causing him to pitch forwards with a grunt. Distracted, Charmeleon stopped attacking the tree, and turned to see a teenager charging at him. Ash smashed into the Pokémon, knocking it off of its feet, as it was unprepared for being attacked by a human. Before Charmeleon could recover, Ash had punched him multiple times, before he was dragged off by the trainer, and thrown to the ground. Who do you think you are, you little sheet? The man growled, standing over Ash. Nobody jumps me like that. Ash's eyes widened as he saw the man reach into a pocket and pull out a knife. A feral instinct took over, and he lashed out, his knee driving firmly up into the man's groin. The man's eyes widened in pain, and he dropped the knife, falling to the ground in agony. Ash scrambled to his feet, and turned to see Charmeleon diving at him. Luck caused the flame Pokémon to miss first time, as it had aimed for Ash before he scrambled up. As it turned and fired a flamethrower attack at his opponent, Ash dropped to the ground, and felt for the Pokeball belt of the trainer he had incapacitated. Not feeling it at his waist, Ash desperately cast his eyes around as Charmeleon stalked closer, unable to use fire attacks due to Ash's proximity to his trainer. Ash suddenly spotted the Pokeball belt lying next to a bag some 5 meters away. Realizing that he would never make it, Ash started looking around. His eyes fell on the knife at his feet, and he picked it up before throwing it at Charmeleon. The throw was terrible, the blade not even pointing at Charmeleon, but it was enough. The Pokémon distracted for precious seconds, Ash got up and threw himself across to the Pokeball belt, pulling out a Pokeball and using it to recall Charmeleon. Slowly and painfully getting to his feet, Ash looked back up at the tree that was burning merrily at the bottom. In the upper branches was an Eevee, looking absolutely terrified. Ash called for Eevee to jump down to him, but the evolution Pokémon was too terrified to move. Looking around, Ash realized that the trees around this one had been burnt down, as if Eevee had jumped from tree to tree as each one was burned down. Glaring back at the man who was still immobile on the ground, Ash looked at the tree once again. There was a fire burning about halfway up, extending no more than a meter up the tree. It was clear that Charmeleon's attempts to burn the tree down had been interrupted before they could get too far. Gritting his teeth at what he was about to do, Ash ran at the tree and started climbing. From above, Eevee was watching his progress in disbelief. As Ash reached the fire, he kept going, straight through it, coming out the other side. As he started to move through the flames, Eevee started to move down towards him, climbing into the arms that were held out to her. As soon as he had the Pokémon in his arms, Ash leaped out of the tree, landing on the ground 4 meters below. As he hit the ground, his legs gave way, allowing the EV to spill out of his arms onto the ground. Ash lay in the dirt, with some of his clothes burning from his climb through the fire. EV started kicking sand at him, which put out the flames. As the adrenaline wore off, he felt the burns on his skin, groaning in the pain. Suddenly he was lifted off the ground once more, picked up by the throat. The man he had attacked was stood in front of him, a look of pure fury on his face. "You started the wrong FNG fight, pal," the man growled, murder in his eyes. He reached for the knife he had recovered, holding up to Ash's face, placing the point in front of one of Ash's eyes. "I'm gonna blind you, and then leave you out here to suffer for as FNG long as FNG possible. Nobody FNG attacks me like that, do you arrgghh?" As the man screamed in pain, he dropped Ash, who tried to move away but felt very, very tired. The man had collapsed, clutching his groin again, with EV stood in front of him, looking fierce. As Ash slowly climbed to his feet, he realized that EV had seen what he had done to the man first time, and given him a repeat performance. Moving over to the man, Ash kicked him one last time for good measure, before limping away. He never asked what EV had done to invoke such rage, and he was never told. However, from that one event, EV felt closeness to the trainer that she had never felt before. So when he limped over the hill, EV didn't even think before heading after him, following him back to his camp, where she was captured in a pokeball, before joining Ash's team. The loyalty she felt from that event had been more than enough to stop her leaving when Ash gave her the option. She had no reason to leave the trainer that had saved her life, and she had never regretted the decision to follow him. End flashback. As the memory started to fade, Ash smiled to himself, particularly as he felt the presence of Espion at the back of his mind. She had been remembering the same thing. The strength he drew from both the mental bond and the loyalty of his Pokémon was more than enough to keep him carrying on, so that the worst abusers of Pokémon, Team Rocket, could be finally broken. As Espion withdrew from her trainer's mind, she thought about the secret she had held since that day. Ash had never asked why she had been stuck in that tree, he had merely thrown himself into first saving her life, and then integrating her into his family of Pokémon. She had become stronger than she ever imagined she could, but she still feared losing the first human to ever show her kindness. The man that had attacked her had been her previous trainer. She had been captured by a poacher weeks earlier, before being sold to the Eric, the man that had abused her. She had stayed with him for nearly a month, before she finally rebelled, in a raid. Eric had been a member of Team Rocket, and had tried to use her to subdue an opponent whilst he was robbing a shop. Her rebellion had caused him to have to recall her, and his Charmeleon had burnt down the entire shop, leaving nothing of use inside it. In a fury, Eric had taken her out into the woods near the town. He released her, and ordered Charmeleon to attack, but she had been too quick. Darting into the forest, she had climbed up a tree. However, she had been seen, and chased through the forest, until there were no trees left to hide in. Eric had burned all the trees around her, and then Charmeleon had trapped her, setting fire to the wood below her. Until Ash saved her. She had never told Ash or any of his Pokémon the abuse she had been subjected to when she was Eric's Pokémon, when beatings and starvation were the least of her troubles when she had been with him. Reflecting on her trainer, Espion thought about the years since she had met him. In all the time she had known him, she had never known Ash to show anything but kindness towards Pokémon. And she had never known Ash to show anything to humans. It was when she spent time thinking about him that Espion realized what Ash had given up in his training. She struggled to be sad for him, she loved her trainer exactly as he was. She knew that if her, or any other Pokémon, were in trouble, Ash would stop at nothing to save them. He had come a long way from that boy climbing through flames to save a Pokémon he had never met, but the core of him was the same. He was still the most caring being she had ever met. As she looked out of the window, Espion felt a trickle of a tear run down her face. All she wanted was to be able to curl up next to Ash, her trainer, her master and her friend. And all she could do was wait, while he suffered in a building that she could watch. She just hoped he knew what it cost her to let it happen. Cynthia stood on the platform in the main training room of the Indigo training area. Behind her stood gym leaders from all 4 regions, whilst at the back of the room were trainers that they had brought with them to help with what they were all doing. With them were the Elite 4 from each of the regions. Next to Cynthia stood the champions of the 4 regions. Lance representing Kanto and Johto, Steven from Hoenn. There was no representative from Sinnoh, because Cynthia had never been defeated as the Sinnoh champion. Technically she was still in place. At the back were the specialists from the camp, along with other trainers that they had asked to be there. All they had been told was that there was a situation that required the presence of powerful trainers, the more the better. It was in effect a call to arms, something that hadn't been seen for a long time. In front of her were the 30 trainers who had been at the training camp. All in all, the concentration of trainer strength in the room was staggering. They were some of the toughest trainers in the world. The last week had been absolute hell for her, with the camp still running whilst she was still trying to organize her response to the capture of the Pokémon Master. Now she was ready. Good morning. What you all hear here is completely confidential. Virtually nobody outside of this room knows what I'm about to tell you. That should give you some idea as to the seriousness of this. Cynthia paused to look around the room. Of all the people in there, only she, James and the other champions knew the full story of what had happened. Explaining to them was going to be hard, but if Mutwo was to be believed, she would need every single trainer in the room as well as the legendary to stand a chance of breaking into the Rocket base. As you may know, 4 years ago Team Rocket stopped their activities. According to sources that have only recently given their information this because they had been attacked and almost destroyed. However, their leader had escaped and started to reform Team Rocket. Their leader is a man known as Giovanni, the ex-Viridian City gym leader. He vanished in the immediate aftermath of the attack on his organization. He was successful in reforming Team Rocket, and they are once again conducting their activities. This we have known for 4 weeks, since a group of rockets were discovered in Violet City by Faulkner. Pausing again, Cynthia waited for the muttering from throughout the room to die down. The gym leaders had known that Team Rocket had resurfaced, but nobody else seemed to. Almost nobody else, Cynthia suddenly noted, with 2 of the trainers on her camp looking unsurprised. She glanced at Sam and Melanie, wondering how they knew. Champion has taken an interest in shutting down Team Rocket once again. Cynthia continued. He managed to discover the location of the Team Rocket headquarters, and 9 days ago he left here to attack the base and try to bring down Giovanni. Since he left there has been no contact from either him or any of his Pokémon. Furthermore, the day after he left, a Pokémon came to visit. This Pokémon is one that is virtually unheard of. He has asked not to be named to any of you. However, he has revealed some information to me and the other regional champions. Until recently, he had been controlled by Team Rocket. He was part of a trap that was laid for Champion when he reached the Rocket headquarters. In the aftermath this Pokémon managed to escape. He came here to talk to me and to reveal what happened. Cynthia took a deep breath before revealing the blow that would shock the assembled trainers. This Pokémon told me that Champion had been captured by Team Rocket. There was instant uproar. Even the gym leaders behind Cynthia were talking now, and there many of the assembled trainers below the platform started shouting up at Cynthia. How do you know it's telling the truth? The Pokémon Master would never be captured by a group like Team Rocket. Lies. They could never. You can't just trust any Pokémon that shows up, it just shows up and... Enough. Cynthia blinked and turned to where Lance had stepped forward. He had a look of fury on his face as he addressed the assembled trainers. Do you honestly think that Cynthia has been duped? That this Pokémon has been lying to her? Do you take her for such a fool? Lance gave the assembled trainers one last glare before turning back to Cynthia. My apologies, Cynthia. Please, continue with your briefing. Smiling to herself, Cynthia turned back to the trainers. Clearly Lance still had problems with his temper. It was something that she suspected would never change about her colleague. He had certainly questioned Mutwo about the event very closely when the two met. Between them the three regional champions had developed plan of action for the rescue, with Mutwo and James contributing substantially. As I was saying, Champion has been captured. I have asked you all here for one purpose. I intend to finish what Champion started. We will go to the Team Rocket headquarters and we shall attack it. This is something that the other regional champions have agreed with. All of you have been asked here to join in. I will not force anybody to join in this endeavor, but if we succeed I believe we will be able to both remove Team Rocket and rescue the Pokémon Master. We will be moving to the location of the Team Rocket base overnight. You have the rest of the day to decide. There will be a briefing later to highlight the strategy. With that, Cynthia turned and left the platform, Lance and Steven close behind her. When we reach the city, we must move quickly. You have too many people to remain hidden for long. Mutwo said, addressing Lance, Cynthia, and Steven. Giovanni will attempt to flee if he feels that he cannot win the fight. If he escapes, you may not have another opportunity like this for years. Don't worry, his capture is our greatest priority. Cynthia assured the Pokémon. In fact, Steven has offered to lead a team to head for him. Indeed, the Hoenn champion said. I will take my elites into the heart of Team Rocket, and apprehend this criminal. I still think it should be me leading that team, Lance grumbled. I have experience in facing off against criminal organizations, particularly ones that use legendaries. Cynthia sighed. Lance, you know as well as I do that as the authority figure for over half our forces, you can do nothing but lead the main group. When we reach Goldenrod City, I will lead a team to look for a champion, Steven will aim to apprehend Giovanni and you will have command of the rest of the trainers. You will get to fight, have no fear. And besides, you will be able to fight alongside me, Mutwo said. How many people can say that they fought alongside a legendary Pokémon? Lance simply glared back. I've fought against legendaries. Makes a far better story. Ask Kyogre if you see him. Under the fierce gaze of the other two champions, as well as Mutwo's impassive stare, Lance relented. Alright, fine. When are we doing the briefings? Steven and I can do them on the train easily as we will only be bringing a few men each. You on the other hand will be addressing the large body of trainers. You might have to do the briefing many times with many trainers. Lance groaned. That was his idea of hell. Now that a plan had been decided, he wanted to proceed as quickly as possible. He did not want to have to brief 200 trainers on each step of the plan. It was at this point where Steven spoke up. I think to prevent our colleague from killing himself before Team Rocket has a chance to attempt it, an alternative might be wise. Steven said with a smile. Lance, split your trainers down to a simple military command. One man can command thousands if he has the right command structure. You have 4 elites, each of whom can lead a group of trainers. You have 16 gym leaders, each of whom has between 5 and 10 trainers who will automatically look to them. The remainder of the trainers that you have to use can be distributed amongst the elites, or the specialists who you have. Then you only have to brief the team leaders, and on the battlefield you can move to where you are needed. It also saves you from endless briefings, and reduces the time that we have to delay in Goldenrod. Lance, Cynthia and Mutwo looked at Steven in surprise. They had no idea that he knew much about leading a group of trainers in a fight. As he registered the looks, he grinned weakly. Remember, I've been champion of Hoenn for longer than either of you two have been of your regions. This isn't my first fight. Still shaking her head in surprise, Cynthia turned back to Lance. It does make sense. Who knows, we might actually learn how to lead a fight as well. Good experience. Lance managed a weak grin. He was unused to being shown how to do anything. Maybe. In fact, we have a lot to thank Champion for. Steven mused. Think about it, we have an automatic structure in place now. Each gym leader can be expected to fight, as they have been picked for their strength, whilst they each have trainers who have trained under them and so would look to them in a fight. Pull together all the gym leaders from 4 regions, and you have a very tough force to face. Team Rocket shouldn't be a problem to deal with. Quite. Cynthia said drily. Remind me to thank him when this is all over. Lance stood up suddenly. I'm going to find my gym leaders and elites. We need to be ready to start as soon as we reach. Walking out the door, Lance headed down the train. Every single trainer who had been at Cynthia's address has come with them, which did admittedly leave them with a transport problem. It wasn't easy to move a large number of trainers secretly across a region. It had been Lance that came up with the answer, which he put forward in his usual unhesitating way. For some time there had been a call for an expansion of the train network that ran in a few places across the regions. A few years ago, Lance had ordered the gym leaders in Johto to divert funds from their cities into building a network across the whole region. When it was finished, every city would be linked by trains, meaning that people could move across Johto very quickly and easily. Lance had forced the plans through in the face of a great deal of opposition, although it had meant that economically Johto was ahead of the other regions, since large public projects tended to create a great deal of employment. Whilst the whole network wasn't finished and trains hadn't started to move for the public yet, cargo trains did move on the network. In fact, goldenrod size meant that a lot of the trains went through the city at some point. There had also been a fair few passenger trains moving workers around, usually late at night. This gave them the perfect cover. The whole force was in a passenger train, which extra carriages had been attached. As a result, they expected to be able to get into Goldenrod overnight, and then use the time to go to ground. At least, that was the plan. Whilst they had doubts that it would fool Team Rocket, it did at least get them all into Goldenrod in a way that could be hidden from the public. Lance walked into the next carriages where all of the elites were sitting as they traveled. As the door to the carriage opened, they all looked up expectantly. My 4, go and get the gym leaders for all regions, along with the specialists that Cynthia had at that camp of hers, Lance said, picking a seat and planting himself in it. Sinnoh and Hoenn, your champions are waiting for you through there. There was a flurry of movement as the various elites moved in the direction they were bade, with the Kanto Johto 4 heading into the next 2 carriages where the gym leaders were with their trainees. Once they were all assembled, Lance stood up again, looking over the 36 trainers who he commanded. Right. Firstly, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Lance Waturu. That you probably do know. What you won't know is my personality. I like plain speakers. That means if you disagree, you say so bluntly. If you think I'm wrong, say so. I detest those who hide behind words. I like action, not words. The Elite 4 with him shared small smiles. They had all been on the wrong side of Lance's temper at some point, and whilst it could terrify somebody who wasn't used to it, they had started to find it quite amusing. The gym leaders on the other hand, looked somewhat scared. The man in front of them was famous. It had been believed that he could have been the Pokémon Master if he wanted, but he had never entered the World League. Stories were told in all regions about Lance, the Dragon Master. The first man in history to be champion of 2 different regions. To say that they had worked with him was a prospect that they were all looking forwards to, but the idea of arguing with him was terrifying. Right. We are a few hours out from Goldenrod, where we will not have time for planning, so this is the only time you are going to get a briefing from me. When we strike, Cynthia and Steven will lead teams into the rocket base to secure both the Pokémon Master and Giovanni. However, our intelligence suggests that inside the base there is space for some 3,000 rockets. Clearly that is too many for us to deal with, but apparently the usual number is closer to about 800 or 900. That leaves a lot of people between the 2 infiltration teams and their targets. This is where we come in. Our attack will be at night, so hopefully as few rockets as possible will be ready for us. Despite this, we expect to have to fight heavily to break this base. But let me make something clear, we will capture this base. From the back, Lorelei looked around the trainers listening. They were hanging on Lance's every word. She grinned, having already realized what Lance was going to suggest. In fact, if he hadn't, she would have considered suggesting it instead. The rest of the trainers though, they clearly hadn't worked out the very large role they were going to be playing in this fight. They were typical trainers, not thinking far enough ahead. But then a lot of trainers were like that. Only the strongest thought ahead. Next to her Karen flashed a grin. She had also evidently worked out where Lance was going. For the structure on the ground, clearly we have too many trainers for me to be in direct command of all of them. So a simple alternative will be used. Each of you will lead a squad of trainers. They will report to you, you will report to me. To keep it simple, the trainers that the gym leaders will use will be the ones from their gyms. That gives us 16 squads straight off. I will also attach one of the trainers who were at the training camp to each squad. They are all powerful trainers, amongst the strongest that Cynthia could find in Johto. One of the Sinnoh gym leaders sniggered, something that Lance did not fail to notice. And whatever your thoughts on that are, Kurt, I suggest you keep them to yourself. They are strong trainers, and they could for the most part crush you. Furthermore, in a situation like this, we are leading nearly 200 trainers into a battle. Make no mistake, this is a fight where getting injured is a very real possibility. There is no room for foolishness and unnecessary bravado. I will have no hesitation to take you off this mission if I think you are too immature. The venom in Lance's voice was palatable now, oozing out. Bruno looked at Lorelei before grinning. It was just like their champion to put somebody on the spotlight like this and then completely embarrass him. The poor man was terrified, but Lance was simply using him to prove a point. As I was saying, each of you will have an additional trainer attached to your squads. Each of the 4 elites will have a squad made up from trainers that we asked to join the mission. They will form reserves, able to step in and help if you get into a big fight. Each of the specialists. At this Lance turned towards them. Will also lead a squad, made up from the remaining trainers that we have. It should average out to be roughly 7 trainers per squad. Any questions so far? There was silence amongst the assembled trainers now. They hadn't expected such an intense briefing, or the decisions to be stated so bluntly. Clearly a lot of thought had gone into this arrangement on the behalf of the regional champions as to how to bring about the highest chance of success. When we reach the rocket base, you will split up. Each of the Elite 4 will act as a reserve for 4 gym leader squad, and 1 specialist squad. The remaining 2 squads will be under my direct command. One of the 4 groups will secure the floors above ground whilst the remaining groups will head below the ground. Once there we will simply move as quickly as possible. According to our intelligence there is only a lift down, and then stairs. When we reach the stairs to the next floor a single squad will be left behind to secure that floor, and the rest of the force will move on. Now, I feel that you should go and brief your squads on what will happen, because we will be striking as soon as possible when we reach Goldenrod. And before you leave. All the gym leaders standing up looked back at Lance. If any one person FS this when it is avoidable, you will regret it. The gym leaders looked at each other, a newfound fear in their eyes. From anybody else such a threat might not have meant much, but backed up by Lance's palatable authority, the threat was very real. They suddenly felt an overwhelming desire to not call his bluff. Ash jerked awake. In front of him was a rocket that he recognized. It was the man that had put him in the cell originally. The man stood staring at him, as if he was looking for something. He acted completely unaware of the gaze of the Pokémon Master. After a couple of minutes, the man stepped back. Champion. I feel I should introduce myself. I am the man who set the trap that caught you. Ash just looked at him, emotionless through the taunting. I am known by the majority of Team Rocket as simply, Agent. The man continued. My name is just as hard to unearth as yours is. So why don't we make a trade? You give me your name, and I'll give you mine. Ash looked at him, finally deciding to speak. I know you won't give me yours, and my name is all I have left. You've taken the rest. Agent laughed loudly. All you have left? I beg to differ. You have a great deal you can offer to us. Having the Pokémon Master on our payroll would be a huge boon. No, was Ash's simple response. No. I don't think you'll find you get a choice. When the boss talks to you, it will be very much an offer you can't refuse. Not if you know what's good for you. The boss? Ash said, fear laced in his voice. Giovanni is coming. Now what I don't understand, Agent said, not bothering to answer the question. Is why you fear the boss over me. Yes, he has control over that lovely little machine behind you, control he has used with admirable lack of restraint, but what he doesn't have is a mind like mine. He is ultimately a leader, whilst I am more the kind of person you don't really want to know, unless something has to be done. And I get things done. Your capture proves that. The only question is whether it is done the boring way, or the much more entertaining way. Entertaining for me at least. Ash looked at his tormentor, a new fear in his features. The man's tone left little to doubt. He really did enjoy inflicting pain on those that he faced. Agent stepped in closer to stare into Ash's face. A small smile of satisfaction was all that Ash could see from the man in front of him before he turned away. At the edge of the cell, before he shut the door behind him, Agent turned back one last time. The boss will see you when he feels you have discovered that anything but obedience is unwise. The task of bringing about that lovely state of affairs is mine. I'm sure it won't take long, you seem to be most of the way there. But please, resist all you like. I need something to entertain me. And the man was gone, leaving Ash to consider what he had heard. In the dark cell, Ash, unseen by anybody or anything, smiled tightly. It was the first emotion to cross his face since his capture. He had made progress. Since the man set to breaking him thought he had nearly succeeded, only token resistance would be necessary to convince him. Misty stood at the train window. It was fair to say that Misty wasn't easily intimidated, but at the moment she was terrified. She feared she was going to ruin the whole thing by a stupid mistake. Behind her was the team that she was to lead in the attack on the rocket base. Daisy had taken the Cerulean trainers, leaving Misty with trainers that had been assigned to her by Lance. They were good, she knew that. Whilst she was almost certainly the strongest, some of them were powerful enough to give her a good match. If they had time for that. Which, Misty reflected, they probably wouldn't. The train had come to a halt in Goldenrod nearly half an hour before, but the majority of the squads had been told to wait before getting off. Misty's squad was due to head into the city in a few minutes. They had a room half a dozen blocks away from the Rocket HQ, and Misty had come up with a simple way of getting there without being discovered. A Monday night wasn't perhaps the most common night for people to be out in the city, but Misty knew that given her squad were all in their early 20s, they could pull it off. She hoped. Gesturing to the squad to follow, Misty headed to the end of the train compartment. A quick glance told her that they were all there, and she opened the door leading off the train. Knowing that this was the hardest part, Misty strolled away, heading straight for the shadow at the end of the platform. Once there, she found a door in the wall casting the shadow, and tried the handle. As expected, it was locked. Quickly releasing Golduck, Misty let him knock the lock out. The door swung open and she stepped inside. Within seconds her squad came through, having not left the train until the door was opened. Glancing around once more to make certain that they were all there, Misty smiled to herself. That was the easy part. Exiting through the building on the other side, Misty slung her arms around one of the guys in the group. Walking with a slightly drunken swaying, she did her best to convey the image of heading home after a good time. As they reached the end of the street they turned, moving along. On the 4th Street, another squad member jokingly pushed the one that Misty had her arm around. As they came together Misty heard a quiet mutter. "Rooftop, behind us, 4 buildings back." As the two broke apart once again, a small Pokémon slipped away from the group. Reaching the side of the street, the Caterpie started to quickly climb. As it reached the top, Caterpie saw a flash of color in the darkness, but by the time the worm Pokémon reached the spot, there was nothing. Hurrying back down to street level, Caterpie returned to its trainer, as two of the guys in the group were loudly arguing as to which way to go. Noting Caterpie's return, Misty stepped forward again. "It's left. How much did you have again?" With a grumble from the man she had shot down, Misty led the group down the designated street. It was going to take a while for them to get where they were going at this rate. When they finally reached the safe room, they were all exhausted. What had meant to be a simple 15-minute walk had taken them nearly 45. Misty was convinced that somebody had been following them, but always staying out of sight. As required, she put a call into Lance. "Made it. Well done, Misty." Lance replied. "Any problems?" "We didn't see anybody," Misty said hesitatingly. "But it felt like we were being followed. We kept seeing hints." Lance's tone was thoughtful. "I thought as much. Every group has had the same problem. But I don't think it's rockets, such skilled observation is unlike them. If they knew where we all were like this, I would have expected an attack by now." "Anyway," Lance continued, his voice regaining its decisiveness. "If you feel secure, you'll carry on into the next stage. Good luck." And the phone went dead. The next time Misty would hear his voice would be at the Rocket HQ, till then the youngest sensational sister was alone. And Misty felt the full weight of the responsibility. Lance turned to look at the other champions. They were in the Pokémon League's office in Goldenrod, coordinating the whole operation. All three of them were exhausted and they still had a day to go before the actual attack. Steven was poring over what they knew about the building, whilst Cynthia was on a sofa trying to stay awake. At the back of the room, Mutwo stood. The Pokémon was almost completely silent, yet his presence outweighed even that of Lance. The Dragon Master gestured for Mutwo to join them, and the psychic type floated across the room. "That's another one," Lance said. "That's 12 groups from 12. Somebody or something is loose in the city tonight." Cynthia yawned. "Lance, if there is, what can we do about it? If Team Rocket knows we are coming, what can they do about it? A trap for 200 of the world's most powerful trainers? You would have to be brave to even consider that. The worst case is that we lose Giovanni. I don't believe that it will be possible to move Champion without alerting us." Steven nodded his agreement. "Don't worry about it, Lance. There is nothing we can do about it. The presence doesn't feel like rockets," Mutwo mused. "It seems far smaller than that. I can't do more from here though, but I believe that there is no need to worry about this." Lance nodded his head in tired agreement. He couldn't think of a way that it could affect the mission. If Team Rocket knew that they were coming, they would be able to do very little to stop them. Suddenly a thought crossed his mind, and he stopped halfway through turning away again, before swinging back. "Mutwo." "Yes." "What happened to Champion's Pokémon?" Cynthia gasped, suddenly alert. It was what she had completely forgotten to ask. 14 of the most powerful Pokémon in the world were loose. Steven looked up from his papers again, surprise etched on his features, while even Mutwo managed to look somewhat surprised. "I have no idea," the legendary said. "When he was captured there was a psychic attack fighting my own, however it suddenly vanished and I didn't actually see or feel any of his Pokémon. I assumed that they had returned to his home. So they definitely weren't captured?" Lance pressed. "Because if they were, mightn't they be used against us? With their trainer as the leverage that keeps them obeying?" Cynthia was suddenly a lot more scared. Having the Pokémon loose was one thing, but having them against her. She remembered the last time she had gone up against one of her successor's Pokémon. His Charizard had destroyed her team completely. To face all of them would be virtually impossible. Even if they do, surely with 200 of us, they can't beat us all. Steven said, although the doubt was clear in his voice. "I don't know. Cynthia said. I don't know how powerful they are. Mutual, Lance said, cutting across Cynthia once more as his voice hardened. How many of the Pokémon that we have with us could you face alone? I don't know. A lot, although I can be overwhelmed. If I was facing them one at a time, probably all of them, but defending myself from that number of attacks and hitting back is very difficult. Attacks will get through if I am rushed. So if each of Champion's Pokémon are half the strength of Mutuo, and they have been captured, we are sunk immediately. We can't beat them and the rockets. I can't believe that they would be captured. Cynthia said, massaging her temples. I mean, they are amongst the most powerful Pokémon I have ever even heard of. I can't believe that Team Rocket could get their hands on them. We won't know till tomorrow. Steven said resignedly. No point worrying about it now. The small Pokémon ran up to the darkened figure that was stood looking out across the city. The figure knelt next to the Pokémon and listened. Once the Pokémon had finished its report, it turned and darted away again. The figure pulled out a piece of paper and put a mark on it. Folding up the paper once again, the figure turned back towards the city. Another location. How many more will there be? Looking out over the city, the figure failed to see another darkened figure step out. As the second figure advanced to the first, still unnoticed, another Pokémon came running up. Moving quickly, the attacker charged at the watcher, before being knocked over by the Pokémon. As the Rattata before him growled its anger, and was quickly backed up by more normal types from the area, the attacker admitted defeat, heading back down the building. The watcher had seen the whole thing and appeared to be somewhat amused as the other normal types vanished back into the shadows. Rattata, you gave the poor man a shock. I suspect he won't bother us again. Anyway, I think we are done for the night. This is one thing I don't want to end up in the middle of. With that, the figure strolled away from the edge of the building, still tailed by the Rattata. Sharpedo was stood behind Espeon. Ever since his conversation with Meganium, the brutal Pokémon was confused as to how to deal with what he had heard. Ever since he had joined Ash, life had been simple. He had trained to become as powerful as possible. He saw the Pokémon that he trained with, and opponents. Strong opponents had become rarer and rarer as time went on, as he became stronger. Problems were simple, and Sharpedo found that given how well he knew the other Pokémon that were with him, problems never came up with them. Their years of solitude were simple times, a paradise that he had lived in. He had thought that everybody had shared in it, their little utopia. His trainer always looked happy with his Pokémon. Ash never looked sad. Whenever he saw his trainer with other humans, Sharpedo found the discussions short and efficient. Ash always left looking happy. Whenever Sharpedo saw the other Pokémon, they all looked happy. He had found them easy to get on with when he first arrived, welcoming. They were his family. His conversation with Meganium threw that belief into doubt. What if his trainer wasn't happy? Sharpedo had thought that Ash had gained as much from their time together as the Pokémon had. Meganium felt different. What if she was right? Espeon knew that Sharpedo was behind her. Meganium had told her what had happened between them, and so she knew it was only a matter of time until the brutal Pokémon came to her. She was the one closest to Ash, she knew exactly what he felt. This day had been one that she had been dreading for some time. As Ash's closest partner, Espeon had seen him turn from the impulsive teenager who had thrown himself into fire to save a Pokémon he had never met into the reserved man who barely ever spoke to other humans. The man who all he had was his Pokémon. Deciding that Sharpedo had been there long enough, Espeon turned her head, gesturing for him to join her at the window. Meganium spoke to you about Ash. Espeon said. It wasn't a question, more a statement, but Sharpedo nodded anyway. About what he's been through. What he's done for all of us. More nods. And now you're here. So ask Sharpedo. I'll tell you what I can. Meganium said how he saved all of your lives. Like it meant something more than I thought. He saved mine as well, and I'd do anything for him. So what's different? Sharpedo asked. What is different for you? The day of departure. Meganium was right when she said that you had to be there to know. But on that day Ash changed. Up to that point in his life, if you were in trouble, he would help you. No matter the cost to himself, he would do anything. Throughout his life he had gained friends, admirers, but that isn't why he did it. He did it because that was what he was. On that day, he realized that if wanted to realize his dream, something had to change. And it did. If he sees somebody in trouble, he will still dive in and help them. And as soon as they are safe, he will leave again. It started as him not wanting to get put in a position where he can be hurt. And then it became habit. Now it is what he is. He doesn't want to be hurt. So it's different because you all saw him get hurt? No. Just it's part of it. We all saw what betrayal did to him. He was 15, impressionable. It has left him scarred. You haven't spent much time with other humans, you don't know what it is like for them. They spend time socializing. 7 years away from them, and Ash has no idea about that anymore. Small talk is something he doesn't do. We saw it happen. He hasn't always been impersonal. He's not. Not to us. We are all he has. But Meganium told you this. What do you want to know? What is it he has given up? I always thought that he had benefited as much as us, the greatest trainer ever. I don't understand how he might not have. Espion's face remained utterly emotionless. That is simple. Ash is now the greatest ever, his dream. Yet the simple sight of Pikachu was enough to shock him to his core, to make him realize that no matter how he tries to hide it, he will always be stuck in the past. Ash lost his friends, his family, everything. Before I met him I never had a family. He gave me everything he lost. Sharpedo moved away slightly. The raw passion coming from Espion was overwhelming. Why did he never go back? The brutal Pokémon asked. He couldn't. If those that left did, he would have to face them again. And he couldn't. Sharpedo nodded slightly. Whilst he didn't really understand humans, he was getting some ideas as to the reasoning of Espion and the others. Moving slowly away, he was surprised when Espion called out to him. You must understand Sharpedo, he has no regrets. We got more than he ever did, but he wouldn't change a thing. He is happy, just he will always be haunted by his past. That is why we are so loyal. Because another loss like that would break him. So, Champion, are you ready to start? In front of Ash was the rocket agent. He had brought a covered trolley into the cell, which Ash did not want to know held. The guards outside had been dismissed. Ash knew that this was the chance he needed. If he could persuade the man in front of him that he was no longer a danger to Team Rocket, and even that he might have broken so he would work for them, he would get his shot at Giovanni. Let's get you down from there, shall we? Doesn't seem to be the right place for such an esteemed guest to be. Though first, I feel I should garb you in something more appropriate. Agent said, smiling to himself. He went to the trolley, and picked up 2 objects. Turning back to Ash, he proceeded to place one of the boots on each of the Pokémon Master's feet. These are a little stronger than you're used to, I'm afraid. Sufficiently strong to disable you permanently. It would be such a tragedy if you could never walk again. Ash remained silent, knowing that what he was about to endure would be the hard. Suddenly he fell from the wall, the manacles having snapped open. Landing on the floor, Ash forced himself to take the fall, not breaking it and not rolling with it. Slowly, painfully, he climbed to his feet, leaving Agent looking at him curiously. I expected you to be more entertaining, Champion. Please don't break. I haven't had a proper challenge for a while. The torturer turned back to his trolley, and pulled out a helmet. Normally I would use images from the victim's own life, but for you we know that's not really possible, is it? The helmet went over Ash's head, revealing a screen on the inside. Unless you want to tell me who you are. Ash remained silent. I thought not. I guess we're doing this the hard way. The screen that took up all of Ash's vision lit up. It was a video of a small village, with children running around. Suddenly the whole image started to burn, the children caught in the flames. Ash stiffened as he realized what the video was going to be like. The next one was a large stadium, filled with fans. A man in the center, a Charizard by him. The man raised a hand, and pointed straight into the crowd. The Charizard took to the sky, ripping into the fans in the stadium. The screams echoed around the helmet, with Ash visibly wincing and twisting to try to get away from it. As the camera moved away from the bloody stands, it turned back to the trainer in the center. Ash. That's right, Champion, an eerily disembodied voice floated through the helmet. This is what you could do. And the beauty is that it is something that you actually could do. You are the right, what's the word? Type. No, I'm not, thought Ash. You have misjudged your man. As the image changed again, this time to a whole field of baby Pokémon, the man and his Charizard there once again, Ash shut his eyes. Immediately there was a shock through his head, enough to cause pain. The surprise of it stopped Ash blocking it, and for the first time since he was captured, the scream was real. Progress, wonderful, progress, came the voice again. Perhaps I should have mentioned this before. Watching the videos is advisable. Ash let out an audible groan, which merely drew a mocking laugh from his torturer. Breaking you will be too easy. The field was stained red, and Ash watched himself stride out into it, looking around, emotionless. Then the screen changed again, this time showing a Pokémon battle from the perspective of a trainer. In the field there was an Ursaring attacking a Chansey. The Chansey was bruised and battered, when the Ursaring's trainer called out for a hammer arm. Well, go on, Champion, fight. The voice floated through again. Or is there a problem? Ash tried to say something but he couldn't. The helmet stopped him from being able to move his jaw enough to form words. The laugh floated through the helmet speakers once again. Tut, 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 tut. The Pokémon Master, being defeated by a nobody. What people would say if they could see this, I do wonder. The fight ended with the Chansey lying on the floor, mortally wounded, the bloodied Ursaring standing victorious. And the scene changed again. A home, a family. A man walked in, and pulled out a knife, setting aside all traces of humanity and ripping the lifeblood from his own family. And another scene. And another. And another. Ash began to lose count, the images beginning to build up on his mind. Suddenly he felt something else in his mind. Not a big presence, just subtle, hidden at the back. Espion had detected her trainer's distress, and was there, giving him the support he needed. Ash made a mental note to thank the Sun Pokémon, as he drew the strength he needed from the connection. Without it, he knew that the relentless onslaught would have taken its toll. And another scene appeared before his eyes. Ash lost track of time when suddenly the screen went dark. The helmet was lifted off, and he found himself lying on the floor of his cell, the grinning face of his torturer above him. Well, wasn't that fun? Don't worry, my friend, we have plenty else to play with. By the time I'm finished you'll be begging me to let you join Team Rocket if I'll just stop. As he finished speaking he reached under the cover on the trolley once more, and pulled out something else. A knife. With an exceptionally fat handle and a wire from the handle to the top of the blade. Admiring it, Agent started to speak once again. Pain is so effective. Yet blood is so messy. This will stop you bleeding, but the pain will be just what we want. And with a smile, the torturer stepped forwards once again. Lance was stood watching the rocket building from a skyscraper opposite, a squad of trainers at his back. They didn't care about being spotted now, there was nothing that Team Rocket could do. As he watched, the first group of trainers appeared in the street below him. Flying Pokémon took trainers up to the upper floors. Pulling out a radio from his upper pocket, Lance spoke into it. Begin. Within moments there were loud crashes. Windows were being smashed, and the trainers raced through the upper floors of the building. Raising the radio again, Lance started to give more orders. Move into the ground floor. Underground teams, you're now on standby. Get that lift ready. Trainers moved into the ground floor. A few moments later, the radio crackled. Lift secure. Moving below ground. Underground teams, move. Lance spoke into it one last time, and then released a Pokémon. Dragonite roared, and Lance swung a foot over his trademark Pokémon's back. The dragon Pokémon took off, flying straight down to the ground, where Lance swung off once again before recalling Dragonite. Behind him, the trainers in his squad had followed him. Striding into the rocket building, Lance reached the lift. It was coming back up from below where two squads were already downstairs. As the lift doors opened, Lance strode in, and led his squad down into the heart of the rocket building. Espion sprinted into a different room in the apartment. The other Pokémon turned to look at her in surprise. Get the others out of their Pokeballs, Espion said. Alakazam crossed his spoons and the Pokeballs all suddenly opened. They followed Espion back through to the window facing the rocket building. As they watched, they saw a group of trainers hurry into the building. Shattered windows were evident from the upper floors. What's going on? Rapidash asked. Some kind of attack on the rockets. Espion said. Ash will need us, so we are ready to help. And Giovanni? I think this might have ruined that plan. Agent stood up. In front of him, Ash was curled up on the ground whimpering, with 4 long slashes across his torso from the knife in Agent's hand. Each time the knife had cut, the blade had been electrified, cauterizing the wound as soon as it was made. There was no blood, but absolute agony for the man cut. So, do I need to do any more, Champion? Agent said, his voice little more than a taunt. Or can I tell the boss that he has a new recruit to come and greet? Ash didn't say anything, but was clutching the injuries across his chest. Oh no, silence is not as golden as everybody thinks. Agent continued. I really must insist on an answer. Yes. Came a faint sound from the stricken Pokémon Master. Sorry. Please do speak up, I can't abide mishearing people. Yes. I'll do it. Really? And what will you do? Agent said, squatting down next to his victim. What will pacify me? Anything. Ash groaned out. I'll do anything, just please stop. Agent stood up again, satisfied. Well, that wasn't too bad, was it? He said, looking down at the prone figure. In fact, I rather enjoyed that. You could do well here. Agent pulled out a radio and spoke into it. Sir, he has cracked. What? Yes, sir. And our guest? Understood, sir. Turning back to the Pokémon Master, Agent pulled out a small remote from his pocket, and pushed a button. The boots that were still on Ash's feet suddenly turned on. The electric shock caused Ash to scream in agony. It seems, my friend, that our party is being ended early. Agent said, speaking over the sound of his victim's suffering. A little situation has come up, and you're suddenly surplus to requirements. I do sincerely wish you luck, Champion. You might even survive. And the man strode away, heading into the heart of Team Rocket's headquarters. As soon as the sound of his feet faded, Ash's non-dead eye glowed an even brighter blue than normal. The boots flew off him, and he slowly got to his feet, a look of absolute fury on his face. Espion's thoughts entwined with his, and within moments the room was filled with his Pokémon. Sceptile handed him clothes, and he quickly got changed, turning back into the Pokémon Master that was renowned. With his hat firmly on his head once again, Ash turned to his Pokémon. What's happened? What is going on up top? There were silent looks, until Espion finally stepped forwards. Cynthia. She said. Quietly. She is attacking the rocket base. Suddenly there was a loud noise. An alarm was going off. Ash looked at it furiously before it suddenly exploded. Espion flicked her tail, as he looked at her. All of you, we are going straight for Giovanni. If we are fast, we might make it. Any rockets you see, crush them. Ash broke into a sprint, his Pokémon flowing around him. It was a 4-minute charge to Giovanni's office. With any luck they might catch the crime boss before everything was ruined.